this computer. Okay. Probably shoot myself if we did this whole thing and then it wasn't recording. You know what I'm saying? All right, bet. So what's up, guys? So I'm Ellie Waves. This is.
I'm Roane. How's it going, people?
So I'm 23. I've been engineering and making music for about 6 years now. What about you, Roane?
I'm 26. I've been making music off and on for the better part of a decade. I've actually only been engineering probably for a couple of years though, like really diving into all the interesting stuff of mixing and engineering side of that. But I do engineer at an actual studio in Fort Worth, Texas now though, as an occupation. So I do not have a 9-to-5 anymore. I just engineer.
Which is amazing, right?
It's the goals.
Yeah, for sure. I'm getting there. Not quite there yet.
Very soon. Very soon.
Very hopefully soon. Yeah. So we kind of were thinking that we would just start with some mindset stuff. And we'll go from there. I think setting the mindset right and just knowing that most of mixing is just comes down to your mind and your processes and then your ears. Those are like the big things I want to hammer home in this. It's mostly mindset. Like, sure, plugins make a difference. Plugins have different textures, different sounds, different quality levels, but it really comes down to, do you know what you're doing?
Yeah, 100%. The biggest thing I had to realize about mixing and engineering is that there's no like binary option. Like there's no correct or wrong way to mix and engineer stuff. It's just a matter of what your preferences, how you want things to sound. Cause I always went to go through and like, okay, I want the cleanest sounding vocals humanly possible. But every once in a while, the distortion actually makes it sound better. And you can muddy up vocals and change the EQ and make everything sound different. It's like, oh, this actually sounds better than if it's just a clean, boring mix off of that. And so you really have to exercise your creativity and build up your ear training, which is the most important thing, and hear the difference between the stuff that you're actually doing.
Yeah, definitely. On that, like breaking the rules and still getting like really good results. Like, so one of my best friends, his brother went to engineering school on like a full ride scholarship. And now he does voiceovers for Adult Swim. So we thought he was gonna do music, but now he's doing voiceover stuff. But anyways, like he was telling me, like back in the day, he was like you should never boost EQs on vocals. And like now I'm like doing that 24/7, you know?
Yes,
like,
exactly that.
Sounds. So like, yeah. So like breaking the rules sometimes, like it's gonna get you the right results. It's really all about the song. And I think that's a mindset thing too, is like each song is gonna be different, and you can have a process, but you should approach each mix different. Like one song might sound great with heavy distortion on it, and the other one might sound like garbage with heavy distortion. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, I equate it to like genres of music. And so if you think about it, on an actual keyboard, you only have 7 white keys and 5 black keys. Like that's what you're working with. And we have so much different genres and subgenres in music, just off of using the same exact notes for absolutely everything. And a big part of that, what I realized is like it goes into like jazz theory. Like jazz sounds incredible because it's just free form. There's no rules behind it. It's like, well, this is your scale that you're in. You're in C major and it's supposed to be all the white keys. But if I throw in the black key and transition into this other one, it kind of leads and it sounds good because it changes the tone and the texture of the actual project. Yeah. And so what a lot of people don't realize is like, yes, you can be bound by that key, but if you experiment outside of it, you actually might get to discover new stuff and new sounds. And that's how new people, like new genres pop up, is people start testing like how far, what's acceptable with what's actually there. So like a big thing like in hip hop now, a lot of new sounds are coming out. They're just like scrapping the low end off of stuff. Yeah. Like it's just like on Drake's project, I don't remember what the track was called, but I think the first track that came out, it had like no low end in it. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I was like, okay, sure.
They're not using EQs to do that.
What are they doing?
He's cutting the sample rate.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, he takes the sample rate and that takes out the low end, and it opens up all this room for Drake's vocal. It's kind of insane, like what he's doing. Like they take out the low end of like everything except for like drum and kick and bass, honestly. Weights and shit. And then Drake's voice, and that's why like Drake's voice just like stands out so hard on top of the beat, just, like, in its own little world, which is so sweet. I love Drake's engineering. But yeah, in terms of mindset, like there's so many like little things that like you're gonna be like, I'm doing this. I'm like, is this the right process? Is this the right process? Like, I think once you figure out just like how to set up the correct template, you know, to get you like the right foundational process going, then it's really just like mindset of like how you're gonna work through everything. Mindset's kind of like a hard topic to just like sit here and discuss. Like, I feel like it just kind of comes and goes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it comes into a little bit of like when you're finding your sound. And so what I do with my mixing stuff, I have a preset template that I throw on, and every time I record, it gets plugged into that template. It's set up to have like a basic good sounding stuff off of it. And my approach with it is I have a specific sound that I want. So usually just because I've been doing it for so long, I can hear them recording the track and I can see, okay, this is how I kind of want this to sound like, and then kind of build off of that structure. And so it's just a matter of just having the experience to go through and you hear what they're trying to go for, what the artist is trying to go for on the track. And then you can kind of maneuver around and create a track around what you think that track should be. And then you work with the artist, obviously, to make sure that it sounds right. Or if you're self-engineering, you just do what you want and make it sound the way you want it to in your own head.
I think that like what's really cool is like you have so much experience with working with other artists, and like honestly, like I'm pretty much all self-taught, like on my own vocals. Like I've mixed my buddies a few times, like Young Crusha here and there, and like I do his stuff now, but like for the most part, it's all been on my vocals.
Yeah.
But like I just started having like some friends come through and like start recording at my place now that I got the Apollo and stuff. And like
Apollo, shout out to the Apollo. If you want to mix and master, just get the Apollo. Honestly.
Apollo, a couple UAD plugins.
Yes.
Record into that shit. You'll get something clean.
100%.
Yeah, honestly. All right, sweet. Yeah. So template wise, I started out with have you ever heard of Neek Attack mixing? Gotta give him a shout out real quick. So he does Little Skies, he does Landing Cube, does a bunch of guys. He did a couple 2K or 24K golden joints.
Okay.
So very well known guy. So he released this template. I started with his template on Pro Tools, and then I just kind of made it my own from there. When you were making your template, did you just kind of go off the top of your head, or did you start with somebody else's?
So my progression was a bit weird. I started back when I did free mixes on RapPad to build up my discography a bit. And I had a dude, his name escapes me right now, but I had his templates. I had like 6 or 7 of them. And then I kind of tailor made it off of them. But that taught me that you can build a template off of what's called the levels that the input volume is coming in. So what happens is if you record the actual vocals into the track, it's going to come in at a certain volume, a certain dB. And when you set your compressors off of the threshold, you can have it set to pre-register off of a specific dB that it hits. And so you just adjust it off of that. And so that kind of got me into the template thing. And so once I got really, really comfortable using that template, then I built off, I got my own new plugins. I joined Plugin Alliance, and I sat through all of their plugins and then just really started going through, okay, I like how this sounds. I like how this sounds. And then I got about 6, 7 plugins, threw it into a chain, and then it's been about 3 weeks just carving out my own template that I thought sound, tested on about 7, 8 different types of sound and tracks. I was like, yep, I like this. And then I just roll with that.
Are you finding yourself changing those plugins often in the chain, or are you adding to it or like taking away?
Depends what artist I'm working with. I set mine up to pretty much streamline my own process. And so I don't change it too much for my sound because I know how I want my stuff to sound. But a couple other people will be like, oh, this dude is doing like trap metal. And I'm like, obviously I want a lot more distortion on a trap metal track than I would on like my own pop R&B type stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'll add in some saturation, some harmonics, some equalizing off of that, and make it sound a little bit more grimy, a little dirtier off of that. But I always start everything off in that thing because I found it easier to mix off of a really, really clean vocal and dirty it up than trying to go the other way.
Oh, definitely. Most definitely. Your raw signal is like the most important thing. And like it makes your job as an engineer so much damn easier too when you start with a clean vocal. So like if you're thinking about investing like $1,000 into plugins or $1,000 into a good preamp and like an SM7B or something like that, like I would go that all day. One question you guys had was like dynamic mics or condenser mics. I think it totally depends on what environment you're going to be most consistently recording in. So like me, I'm in my apartment. Sure, I got some acoustic foam that you can see just kind of thrown around everywhere, but you know, it's not ideal. It's not a studio like you got. So I'm mostly going with a dynamic mic because I can get right up in the face of it. If I go this far away, then no one's gonna be able. It's not gonna be able to pick it up. So it's not picking up any of that room ambience. So SM7B, if you're on like a budget, need a really good mic, and are in like a just your room or something like that, I would go with the SM7B. If you're in a more studio setting, or have the ability to have more acoustic foam and stuff like that, I would definitely go with the condenser. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely 100%. And even also more so than mic, because this is the Slate VMS mic. This is what
Oh
I
wow.
use down here. It's a pretty cool little guy, but it's got its own little stuff. And then I also have my own little acoustic phone in the
Yeah.
background, just kind of thrown about just for rough demo recordings. But I do record in the studio. I know a lot of people don't have access to a studio, and Neumann's and KSM 44s and AKG microphones and all the Abbey Road stuff. I understand people don't always have access to all that stuff. So I like condenser stuff for rapping, and then dynamics for singing. That's like the broad general stuff that I've usually gone through.
That's the opposite of what I would think.
Really?
Yeah, I would definitely expect condensers for singing, but I can see that because condensers would pick up more of like the just nuances in people's voices and stuff and all those imperfections.
Yeah, and especially when you're rapping and you're like rapping fast, I want
Oh yeah.
everything picked up because I'm pretty damn good with an EQ and noise. I have the best noise gate on the planet. Oh my god, it's not even funny. But the but the it just helps a lot if I can hear everything that is picking up and it's not killing any frequencies. It's not helping. I don't want my microphone to help me. And that's kind of, and this goes back to the whole mindset thing. Like everybody mixes and engineers differently. I like everything humanly possible in a track. I don't want anything cut out. I'd rather not have like ambient noise or like white noise out there, but I'd much rather have white noise and all of the frequencies access to than cut off white noise and like you're missing everything above 15K hertz.
Yeah, definitely. And just like with breaking the rules sometimes, like if you have static in your recording at like some point, like it might aesthetically fit that track too.
It's
Like
RC20. That's all it is.
like it might fit, as an
Yes.
example. So like my first mic was static. I didn't know about noise plugins, honestly. Like I was just not using them. And then I talked to some guy. He's like, yo, throw a noise plugin on this. But like it worked out because it fit the aesthetic well enough to pull it off for sure. So totally feel you on that. Yeah, you got something, man?
No, I think for that, yeah, the condenser microphone is, and again, it's just very much seasoned to taste. Guitar Center, if you're about to get a microphone, go to the Guitar Center, test out all of the mics, and frequency range of your voice also matters a ton. So like Audio Technica, I started on the AT2020, the USB, as most people tend to do, because my voice at the time was a lot higher, and even now my rapping voice is about an octave or two higher than what I speak in. And it's really, really great in like mid to high range frequencies. It doesn't pick up the low end so much, but I don't have a lot of low end in my voice. And so I really wanted to amplify what you have. Blue Yeti is also very, very good for like the beginner stuff. And it picks up a little bit more on that lower octave outside of that mid to high range thing. And so your voice will matter off of the type the type of mic that you get. So test out a bunch of microphones before you purchase one. And also, even more important than the microphone is recording quality. Or room treatment. I can have a $600, $700 Neumann and record in my bathroom, and I'm not going to be able to get a good mix out of it at all.
Also preamp too. I just kind of noticed like upgrading to the Apollo. I was using like a Mackie Audio preamp that was like $100, got the job done. Gave me because SM7B, dynamics, they need shit ton of extra gain. So I pretty much got that because it was like the cheapest clean gain that I could get. And that got the job done. But like then I was kind of realizing like, hey, like I'm getting some latency and stuff, and like I'm getting this and that. And like as soon as I got the Apollo, like even just going in dry with no plugins running into it, like the difference that can make on like your recordings is just phenomenal.
Oh,
And
it's
like,
it's mind-boggling.
it really is. Yeah. I going back to templates. So if me personally, I would recommend if you were just starting out, just find an engineer that you really like and who mixes someone that you like and see if they have a template out there and just start there. Because the biggest part about a template that gets confusing to a lot of people is buses and sends. And I noticed like you can really tell like amateur mixers from people who kind of know what they're doing by who's using buses and sends. Definitely, like that's like the first thing I look for. So it's is buses and sends, and like just having all that set up and just ready to go always is great. Like I just have like 10 different sends set up all the time with the plugins just inactive, and like I just throw them on the send, and then boom, like ready to go, and then I just adjust from there, and it makes it super easy, saves a shit ton of time, and time is money when you're an engineer, no doubt.
Exactly.
You want to make hits and you want to make them quickly, and if you a lot of times too, like I'll find that if I spent 10-15 hours on a mix, it sounds bad. If I spend 2 hours on it, it comes out good.
Dude, that's facts. That's absolute facts. And the same thing with like creating your own music too. Like I found like my best songs is like, oh, I freestyled this in like an hour or so, and this is like my favorite song I've done. Whereas the one you sit down and really craft for days and weeks, and you're like, it doesn't hit as hard.
Yeah, and it's weird sometimes too, because it's like what you think isn't gonna hit is like what hits too. Like the song I had with Hyde, When I Sleep I Dream of You, like I wrote that one in 45 minutes, and then I sent it to Hyde, and like he wrote his thing in probably like 20 minutes, threw it together. Like that one killed it. But then this like song that I spent like 4 days writing, crafting each verse, I was like, this one's gonna go crazy. Got paid for Adrian Stretcho to mix it, like who's better than I am and stuff, and like nope, it wasn't nearly as good. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Yes.
It's crazy. Really shows you everything is opinion. But yeah, I would get a template and then start customizing it like Roane did with his, and like what I did with mine. You can just change out plugins. In terms of like, what's interesting is plugins. Are you a fan of like getting a big library of plugins?
So let me talk to you guys real quick, and let me save you a shit ton of money. I have 462 plugins
Ooh.
for mixing. I reach for 20 to 25 consistently.
Yep.
And so do not go crazy buying plugins because you just won't touch it and stuff. Some of the stuff, especially Waves is the worst, because Waves sucks you into bundles. They suck you into deals. I was like, hey man, this 70% off. It's like, oh yes, I need this. Like buy 2, get 4 free. I'm like, yes, I need all of these. And then you don't touch them ever, ever. So the best advice for plugin use I can say is use the stock shit. And then once your ear realizes that the stock stuff doesn't sound good enough, or you can start hearing the plasticness of the compressors, or this EQ just isn't giving me enough options, that's when you start exploring your plugin options.
Yep.
Don't purchase anything before you can hear the difference, because Hyde, I got a hook from Hyde, and it sounded like legit studio quality. And he sent me the stems. He sent me the Logic Pro project. He only used stock plugins, only used stock stuff. And I was like, yo, like this doesn't make sense. And then I tried to duplicate the mix with my plugins, and I couldn't get it to sound as good. And I was like, this does not make any sense. And so master the EQ and compression, everything off of your stock stuff before you go purchasing the new plugins, because you will waste a lot of money doing that. Take it from me. I have done it. Yep. It's good to have access to, because there'll be one time like every 6 months where I'm like, oh, you know what? I haven't used this distortion yet. And let me see what this sounds like. Oh, it actually works. But on the macro level, it's just not worth it. So master the stock plugins. And then once your ear starts picking up and like, hey, this doesn't sound quite right, especially with reverb, you can buy so many reverbs just trying to find one that sounds great. But if you're not hearing how bad the current one you have sounds, then you'll need to be buying plugins off of that.
Definitely. And my case too, I mean, exactly that. Like I have so many Waves plugins from all their bundle deals, and they get you, and they're all nice to have. But I also could have like tried a trial version of them for 2 weeks and see if I like the sound first, and like tried out like a whole bunch of them instead of just committing to using one. And that probably would have saved me a ton of money. I do like having a big library. It will be nice, like if I just like go around and start mixing other people, and you're getting more complete projects, ready, and people already have chains set up. It would be nice just like have all those filled out. But yeah, definitely. And like you can do something like the Slate. If I just needed some quality plugins and didn't have much money, Slate everything bundle, I would just get it for a year, $9 a month for a year. That's fantastic. Get you like pretty much everything that you would need, minus maybe a good reverb, but they do have that Slate's Reverb Classic, which is pretty good.
And that Fresh Air, I think, is made by Slate too.
Yeah.
Fresh Air is really, really great.
That's an exciter though, isn't it? Fresh Air?
Fresh Air?
Yeah.
It's reverb.
Is it? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, they do have a couple really good quality reverbs. Yeah. I find myself going to Slate plugins every mix. I have the virtual mixing rack just on my chain. Always using them. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I've got a plugin alliances. It's kind of like Slate. It's $25 a month, and it gives you I think 200 plugins, but it's just like one of those plugins is like $400, and so it's just a value proposition at that point.
Yeah.
And I use 80% of my chain is just off of those plugin alliance things. But I got that when I realized, hey, this stock compressor is not what I needed to sound. Then I went through my infinite list of compressors and I was like, you know what? None of these sound quite right. And then I found the other stuff. I'm like, oh, this is what I need. And so same thing with if you're a producer, I know it's a mixing engineer, but same thing with producers, VSTs. Stay the hell away from just buying stuff.
Yep.
Omnisphere, you do not need Omnisphere. I'm telling you, if you cannot make your stock VSTs work, you do not need Omnisphere. You know why? Because
Yep.
you're not going to know how to use it properly. You're going to spend your $500 on it, and you're just not going to know how to maximize it. You're just going to be pulling up presets and plugging it in, and you don't need it for that. It's much more powerful than that. You lose 10% of it. It's like getting a Lamborghini and just driving around in the school zone.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not what you want.
With mixing, for real, it's like your ears are so important. Like I took maybe 6 months, didn't mix anything, and I got 10 times better when I mixed again. And that's just because I was listening to music with headphones that I usually mix with, or just sounds that I normally mix with, and really just noticing different stuff. And like that alone just improves your skills as a mixer so much, because it really is what you can hear. And like when you're turning a dial, how much can you really hear what you're changing? Like an attack, release, just frequency range, just like a couple dBs. And sometimes those moves, like deep in the mix, you're not gonna hear those moves in the mix, but once you start mastering, you're gonna hear those moves a lot. On like with mastering, like if your levels are 0.2 2 or 3 dBs off in certain areas, when you master that, it's not going to come out right if it's just not feeling right. And that's something that's very overlooked. In terms of like processing, I usually start with just leveling, just because I find I'm constantly leveling the whole time, always monitoring. I try to keep my mix bucks around like 6 dB and that range, and then I definitely start with the levels. And then I recently started doing this thing. I sent it over to you with where you do the kick and the bass last, and I found that super interesting because it allows you to kind of set the noise floor first, which is majorly important when it comes to how loud stuff's going to be. And in this day and age where everyone's just constantly pushing that envelope up and up just to pop out the speakers in the streaming era, like you got to have competitive masters, and that requires a higher noise floor.
100%. And when he says loud, do not get it confused. Loud does not always mean the most dBs up there on the register. So the way your ears perceive stuff is, I won't get too physicsy in it, but in short, you can have two tracks that both register at 0 dBs, and one will be significantly louder than the other. So if you think about it, like if you're cooking and you have a bunch of different elements, you have 20 different ingredients thrown into one thing, it's going to be hard to taste one specific ingredient. Whereas if you have 10 and you like use water to enhance the other 10, it might be more flavorful because you're letting the independent flavors of everything kind of stand out a little bit better.
Yeah,
and so that's the same thing with mastering. And just mixing in general, having a specific place for everything will get you a much better result than just having everything. And so if your 808's not hitting loud enough, the answer is not always to boost up the gain on the 808. It's a rare answer to boost up the gain on the 808. You usually have some low end stuff conflicting with it. And so you got to remove that over there. That way the 808 can really shine in that one specific register that it is. If you have over 10K hertz on your 808, you're probably doing something wrong because you don't need all that stuff in there. It's just getting in the way of the other instruments that you have.
Exactly. I found myself cutting out low end of instruments a lot too, just to make room. I really like the low end to just shine and let that be the kick and the bass and let it own it. And I don't want anything else in that domain. Maybe a little vocal depending on the take here and there, but yeah, for the most part, definitely. Yeah, dang, I was gonna say something else on leveling that. Oh, loud. Okay, yeah. So gain is volume, but loudness is different. Loudness is how consistently something is loud, pretty much, or like how consistently what volume something is at. So like if you have a guitar that's playing at like it can still be peaking at 0 dB, but is it most of the time when it's not, when you don't hear the strumming, it's going to be lower in volume, like maybe like -8 or something. So the range is so wide. So like loudness, it would be like saying, okay, instead of it having being at -8, when it's quiet, it's at -4. So that's going to ruin your dynamic range a little bit, or not ruin it, but it's going to make it a smaller dynamic range, but you get more loudness. So there's always a give and a take with engineering. Every move you make always is taking away from something else. So you always got to think of that too. I find myself right now trying to do less to get more. I've been cutting out using some of my buses recently. Like I don't really use a mix bus anymore. I send the beat straight to the master. I send the vocal sums straight to the master. So I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it kind of messes with the processing. Have you ever played around with any of that?
So I stay away from. I've gone back and forth because I talked to a dude who his name's Mashbit. He's a local dude who's really dope as hell on the engineering side, and he has his mastering chain set up, and then he just mixes around the master, which I thought was just crazy to me because just the leveling on everything would just get so confusing.
Yeah.
But it works for him, and I tinker with it, and the result I've landed on now is I just ditch the master, and so I don't master. I don't really master anything, honestly. I'll go through and I'll mix everything. And then when it's all done and I feel like it's at a good thing, I'll just crank the track as a whole volume all the way down.
Yeah.
And then I'll throw my mastering thing once it's at about -60 dBs. And then I'll throw my ozone, my different compressors, my maximizers into it, and then adjust from there. Yeah. But I don't master too much. What I do have though, and this is another important thing for in your template, what you have set up, subgroups are critical. And so I'll have all my lead vocals in one chain, and then I'll have a compressor and a limiter on those to kind of link them all up and have them sound cohesive as one unit. Same thing with my background vocals, same thing with all of my drum stems. That way they sound cohesive together as the whole that they're supposed to be. And then when you have those subgroups aligned, you're really only mixing in like 5 stems as opposed to trying to juggle 30 or 40 at one time.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And like what you said with the plugins too, I look at plugins, especially like compressors, as textures. So like when you put one plugin on every vocal, it's just gonna glue them all together really well because they all now have that same sonic texture. So that's the huge benefit of buses. And like what you said with your buddy, he works with the master first. I know a lot of people do that. A lot of engineers start with just their main like a lot of it's like a channel strip or just a compressor or solid EQ, and they start with that always, and then they work their way out of that. So then they always have that texture of that plugin on the full mix while they're mixing it. And so I think defining your process and also like you can change it up, but like if you're constantly changing your process and you don't have any approach to a mix when you sit down and it's not consistent, you're never really gonna like learn where you're going wrong or where you can improve, because every mix is just gonna be different. So you're not gonna be able to see those variables well. And that was definitely a huge problem for me. I would just come to a mix and be like, oh, okay, this level needs to be turned down. Okay, I want to put an EQ here. But like now that I've really focused on like, okay, I'm gonna do levels first, and then I'm gonna clean stuff up. Then I'm gonna focus on the beat, and then I'm gonna move to the vocals and start adding in my plugins, and then this and that. And that's when I started really getting super good at having a process and also identifying exactly where things go wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the difference between how you handle stuff and versus how I handle stuff, because you self-track. And so me as an engineer, when I'm tracking another artist, I'm controlling the input volume as I go. And so I don't have to do too much leveling stuff because I'm controlling the amount of volume that the input vocals are coming in on the front end, because I'm with the Apollo off of the rip off of that. And then I can mix while the stuff is getting tracked and kind of adjust the levelings off of that. And so that's the benefit to going to a studio, is that you have someone else having to control the levels for you. And so by the time they walk out of that booth, like levels are usually pretty set. So I don't worry too much about the leveling anymore, just because I do that too much. Because I don't even track myself anymore. So I don't.
Stems, though? You got to level those out.
Beat stems, I work with really dope ass producers, and so I don't have to do a whole lot of things. They usually pre-level and they don't normalize everything, which if you're a producer, do not normalize everything off of the export when you're doing it. I know you'll think it works, but it just makes more work for the people on the back end, because then they have to go through and adjust the volumes on the other side. But yeah, sometimes I do have to go through and adjust the levelings on how much I want off of it. But usually with beat stems, because I mix a lot of trap stuff, it's usually like 6-7 stems tops. And so it's not the end of the world if the levels aren't perfectly good. And I'll usually make like a final adjustment at the very, very end once the vocals are set. So my chain, when I go through and do vocal, or when I mix everything, I go lead vocals first, background vocals. And then now that Waves put me onto this new one, or Ellie put it on this new one, is the keys and melodies. And then I go through and I do my drums. And then after that, I go through and I do my low end and all that stuff. And then I kind of level everything off of that, which it's counterproductive doing it that way, but the sound difference is pretty extreme when you just have to dial in the low end at the very, very end instead of like building everything around the low end. That's at the front.
Seriously, it sets that noise floor, and that noise floor is seriously so important. At the end of the day, so adding that low end at the end, because it adds like it hides so much. Definitely. Mm-hmm. And like when you have it and you're mixing with all the time. So when you save it for last, it really can make a big effect. And I also think it's like each track, you might I might start with the beat one track, but I also might do vocals another track. And I think it also just depends on that track and like, are the vocals the huge priority in that track, or is that guitar melody the huge priority? And whichever one it is, that's what I'm going to start with, because that's what I want to feature. What were you saying? You work with awesome producers who come with pre-mixed stuff. It sounds really good as soon as you get it. I used to play around a ton with the stems, like panning, all this crap. And then I just kind of realized, these are great producers. So trust that too. And don't change the sound that the producer's giving you. They made the beat, the artist liked the beat. So like, if you're just adding a whole bunch of stuff, you're taking away from what the actual beat is. And like, the people might not like it. So Neek, he said like people trust him to mix their music, because when they know that all he's trying to do is just send them something better than they sent him. Granted, he's working with tracking engineers who already have solid chains in place. But I think that's super important. Like you can go insane with panning and stereo field and stuff, especially like if you're in a studio with really nice speakers, because you can hear all that stuff. But when you go to your phone, what's that going to sound like? Because most people, like the first impression they're going to hear is off their phone. Especially with like the way that a lot of people promote music these days with social media. So that's how I kind of think about mixing these days. I just want to make it a little bit better, and keep the integrity of the track and the beat. And I'm not making music for what's the word I'm looking for? Like audiophiles. Is that maybe that's people who just have extremely nice speakers and gigantic studios who can hear all the stuff, who get super anal about your panning and stuff. But in most cases, you can just keep everything 100 and just go with what the producer had, and it's going to sound great. Definitely.
Yeah, and that's the issue I usually run into, because I get so excited because like the tech I record on and the tech I mix with is just so high end. I'm like, oh, do this, and this. But it's really, really crucial to understand who your audience is. And like, if you really want your mixes to stand out, really, really, really take time to imagine the ideal audience person that's going to listen to your track. So if you're making something for TikTok, specifically TikTok, you need to understand, okay, I can't mix this on $500 speakers, because people are going to listen to this on their Apple earbuds. They're going to listen to this on their phone. So it sounds super counterintuitive, but you need to tailor that mix to sound the best on the cell phone. Mm-hmm. And so you'll have like a bunch of old school people say, hey, use the car test, use the car test. But a lot of people, they listen in the car, but much more so on their phones. And so you're almost becoming like the new phone test. It's like, okay, this sounds great on my $300 Rockets. How does this sound on my iPhone though? How is this speaker really resonating with this? And so if you can get that, then it works wonders off of you, because that's going to be their first impression off of it. Same thing if you're running like Instagram, Facebook ads, you need to make sure that it sounds the best on that ideal platform instead of just sounding great. It might sound trash on your big speakers, but if you're making music for the people that have $500 speakers at their access, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of clout, because there's not a lot of people that just have that lying around or whatnot.
And there's definitely something to say about mixing on bad speakers too, because it's harder to hear stuff. And I know you mix in mono a lot. I'm sure we're going to dig into that, but like just mixing on bad quality stuff, like can really help, because if you can get something to sounding great on a phone speaker, like when you do put it on those big speakers, I almost guarantee you it's going to sound amazing. Like it's going to blow your mind on how great it sounds. But like what Roane said, like if you got to think about who your listener is. are you making headphone music? Are you making, are you going to promote your stuff on Instagram where people are just going to be scrolling and hear your song? Like, then make it pop on your phone. Make it pop in headphones. Use Apple earbuds, AirPods, what's everyone using? Like, not everyone has $500 headphones. So you don't want to always prioritize that. Definitely.
For sure. That's something I'm still learning.
Yeah, me
It's
too.
hard for me to get away from, just because, as I said, like recording in studio
Mhm.
is really difficult, because I have the Abbey Roads mics, I have the Apollos, I have all of this great sounding stuff. I'm like, yes, this sounds absolutely incredible, but then it sounds great there with the sub bass too and everything like that. And then I go
Yeah.
to my phone, I'm just like, it's not quite there. And then I have to go through and I have to get rid of my engineer thing, because it's going to sound best if I mix it to those high quality
Mhm.
speakers, because that's what those things are designed to do, is amplify all the sounds. And so it's going to sound the best there, but that's not what the people are going to listen to. Like, people don't have Adam sitting at their home. Like, that's not my ideal demographic. And so really, really tailor making your mixes to that are going to help you go far. And it'll also help you kind of put yourself in the person's shoes that's listening to it a lot better. And that'll help with your own artistry, especially if you're self-tracking, because once you start visualizing your own ideal demographic, then you start tailor making your music to that person as well, because the person that's listening on their phone probably listens to a particular artist. And then you can say, okay, let me listen to this artist, find out what they're doing, and then start emulating them, making it your own style off of that. And
Yep.
so just ultimately, with a lot of stuff in music, just visualize your ideal customer and build it off of that, and that'll help you a lot.
Yep. Couldn't agree more on that. And that's very critical too. Definitely. Like that's some next level kind of stuff that'll take your mix to definitely do a next level. Um, so you want to start digging into our into some chains or some vocal stuff?
Yes. And
Yeah,
so
the good stuff.
first thing so a little background. I use Logic Pro when I mix. Ellie uses Pro Tools.
Yep.
I use Logic because Logic is the best objectively. He uses Pro Tools because
Best objectively.
he doesn't use a Mac, to my knowledge.
No, I use a Mac. I switched to a Mac now, man.
Oh, if you have a Mac, there's no reason. There's no
Yeah, no,
excuse.
I don't know. I'm just used to Pro Tools now. Like I was on FL for a while, and then I was just like, screw this, I'm going Pro Tools. The first mix I ever did on Pro Tools sounded 10 times better than my in FL, and I was like, okay, I'm using Pro Tools. Um, Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton, and any of those are going to work well as long as it has the features you need. It's really about how well you know something,
Yeah.
and what you can get out of it.
And that's what I usually say. So I use Pro Tools, I think, is great for pure vocal rendering.
Yep.
I like the creativity you can do off of the production side with Logic, because producing in Pro Tools is just horrid.
If you don't know the hotkeys, man, it takes so long to do stuff. That's like the
And
biggest
then
Logic users. Like they have a faster workflow than me.
100%. Everything is just so streamlined in there. The Apple just makes it so easy.
Yeah.
But with my chains, as I said, I have a plugin alliance. A key part of your chain, which I notice a lot of people forgetting about, parallel compression. I know some people get away from it and move away from it, but having a clean parallel compression is critical. So what parallel compression is effectively you send a compressor off to your bus, you EQ, you smash the hell out of the compressor, which means just take all the ratio all the way down, just push it all the way you have. If you have the visual compressor, wait till that little threshold monitor where it tells you where it's hitting slams all the way over to the side, and take your EQ and cut out everything on the low end and then boost up the high end a lot. And what that helps do is it helps crisp up the vocals a little bit more than you can get on your regular side. So you'll notice if you do that just off of your regular chain and you just try and get a little bit of high end, you're not going to have it as crispy as you want.
Mm-hmm.
On top of which, having it off of that set bus allows you to dial in the amount and kind of season it to taste.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Ellie was talking about before with the buses and how he can see like an amateur mixer versus like a season one with the buses action. All of my effects go off on my buses. And so the only stuff I have on my main chain is EQ, compression, and auto-tune. And that's usually it. Might throw in a noise gate if I want to. I have a noise gate, it's called Unfiltered G8. This noise gate is like it blows my mind with what I can do. I can do glitch effects like gross beat stuff off of this one noise gate. And I was showing Hyde it when he came down here to shoot the Wilderness music video. And he was like, why is this noise gate so good? And I was like, I don't know. It's just a noise gate, but it's
Yeah, but it kills it.
so damn good. So I use that on a lot, especially if I'm mixing non-studio vocals.
Uh-huh.
I definitely use that because you can dial in the mix of it too. Just in the plugin without sending it to another bus. And so I like that a lot. But all my other stuff is just that main chain is designed to get the vocal as clean as humanly possible. And then I'll work off of that. I'll say if I want more distortion, I might throw it on my main chain, but most of the time I throw it into a bus and then EQ off of that, because the reason you want to put stuff in a bus is it gives you more control over the effect. And so you'll notice when you throw reverb specifically, reverb, if you just put it on your regular main chain, it'll sound like you're recording in a bathroom, and that's not the effect you want. But if you put it in on your bus, then you can control, okay, this is 100% of the reverb sound, and you can really edit that to make sound the way you want. You can EQ out the low end, EQ out the high end, and make it sound really airy. And then what you can also do is just manipulate that one particular sound. And so what I use on a couple of tracks is I'll take that reverb that I have, a really nice sounding reverb that I have, and then I'll automate it to pan around in headphones. And so it kind of gives like a nice little echoey feel, and it gives a little bit more interesting, a little bit more movement in the tracks off of that. And so just sending your effect stuff off to your buses will make your mixes easier, because you can really dial in the amount of the effect without having to take away from the cleanliness of the raw vocal that you have.
Absolutely. And a lot of plugins have like a mix knob that you can use, like on a lot of delays, like the wet and dry signal, like you can, or reverb too. You can use that and throw it on your main chain. But when you do put that on a send, and it gives you total control, because you can be like, okay, this reverb sounds like this. Now I'm going to take an EQ, distortion, like you can do anything. It just gives you so much control. And then you also have this super easy to automate. You don't have to go in, and automation is just next level stuff. And if you're not automating, you need to be.
Honestly.
In terms of what I've been doing recently, so when I get my dry vocal right, now I'm running through some sort of preamp. That's usually it, and I record into that with the Apollo. So I already have like a kind of juiced up signal going in. I try to keep it at around like 6 dB. I actually use a VU meter and try to have it hit around like -18 in like a +1, -1 range, kind of sitting around 0. And then from there, I apply my denoiser. I use the RX8 from Ozone.
That plugin's broken.
You don't like it?
No, it's so powerful. It's upset. I said, dude, we did a video shoot by a freaking waterfall.
And it turned it off.
It turned off the waterfall. I was like, yo, what the hell is this?
Yeah, dude. There's some noise plugins. Ozone has some quality plugins. Some of them miss, but the ones that work, they work definitely. So I use that. And then one thing that I've been using, this is a secret sauce thing. I use Vocal Rider right there, and that automates the level going into my compressor. Do you not like that?
I do. Vocal Rider is a plugin I got hustled into, because I went through and I saw what it did. I'm like, yo, this is exactly what I need.
Yep.
But for the life of me, I just don't reach for it anymore. It's probably because I end up mixing more people now than my own stuff. And so I, like I said before, I control the input volume on the go. And so like while the recording, I'll adjust everything on the Apollo. And so I don't use it as much, but I just never did it because I saw it and I'm like, okay, this thing automates the volume for you and like levels it and limits it as you go. I'm like, this is exactly what I need. Yeah. And I just never reach for it. So I have bad taste in my mouth with it, but I do know a lot of people that use it to a lot of success, and it makes things very, very easy on the leveling side.
I tend to use, I go for smooth with it. And then I record, I let it do its automated thing, and I record that. And then I'll go in and make any edits that I need to, that are like, the parts that are, the automation just doesn't get right by itself. I'll go and manually do that myself. And that just saves me time of having to go and automate everything by hand and listen to like every note and stuff. It generally gets it pretty close. And then even if it's not perfect, once you run that into compression, and you get a couple compressors going, it's going to flatten out really well. And that's going to get you a really smooth sounding vocal. So I do recommend giving that a shot. But if you have the time to manually do it. But if you want to just automate it real quick, try it out. Vocal Ride. It's like $30 from Waves. Definitely recommend it. It's good on like singing stuff for sure.
I also don't automate volume anymore.
Okay.
I got tired of doing it because every time without fail that I automated volume, I had to go back and change something, and then
Yeah.
it just makes everything all over the places. So the issue with automating volume is the last step in any mix before you send off to mastering is leveling. And
Mhm.
so when you go through, because you want everything to sit at the place you want. If you're sending stuff to a master and expecting them to fix everything, don't do it. The key part of mastering and what makes a great master a good master is that the mix is quality. If the mix isn't quality, you're trying to fix stuff in the master that you should have done in the mix, you're not going to get a great sound. So like if you're trying to get stuff to pop out in the mix, like vocals or something like that, fix that in the mix, because trying to fix stuff in the master, the only thing the master should be doing is just think of it as like garnish.
Yep.
You're garnishing everything, that everything's made, everything's cooked, it's all done. You just need to make it look a little better. You're just increasing the volume, just making it sound a little clearer, making it a little louder. That's
Yep.
all you should be doing on your master. You should not be trying to fix anything that was down in the mix. Don't add any effects or whatnot. Just boost what they have up until, you know, the maximum loudness that they have. Maybe increase the dynamic variation a little bit, but everything you can do in the mix, do in the mix. And so for that reason, I don't like automating the volume, because when you automate the volume, it locks it in to the actual DAW that you have. And so if I change the levels, if I say, okay, I'm gonna take this whole track down another half dB, that automated volume is still locked into that set that I had. And so now whatever I automated is going to come in louder than everything else, because I didn't tell it, hey, I automated this to hit at -11. I brought everything down an extra half dB. That thing that's at -11 is still going to be at -11.
Yep.
And so I just stopped doing it. A way I got around that is the compressors I'm on my subgroups. I micromanage the hell out of those, and then I throw limiters after that compressor. And so it kind of has everything, gets everything to hit the levels that I want.
So you get your consistency.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so sometimes on like ad libs, if I want stuff to pop out more, then I usually have to do a workaround off of that. But for the most part, it works out for me. You can automate volume, and automation in itself, you definitely need to do. I just don't like automating volume for the purpose of whenever I level, I end up having to change stuff, and it's just,
I
it's
totally
irritating.
agree with that. And that goes back to what I was saying about like the 0.2 or 3 dB moves and levels can make such a big difference when you're on the final mix or final master. Massive difference. Like don't overlook that. So with the vocal automation, that's why I do it on the raw vocal before it goes into my vocal bus where I'm putting my chain. So I do that first. So then the vocal bus, when it's done, it's going to be that consistent level. And I avoid limiting, doing it that way. I don't use any limiters on my vocals ever.
Really?
Never.
Oh.
I try to stay away from limiting as much as possible. You obviously need it in cases on the master, especially as that last plugin, you just need it because you don't want to clip or anything. But in general, I try to avoid using limiters, and I want to add clean gain where I can. And that's kind of my goal. So I get that RX8 vocal rider, and then maybe I'll throw autotune on there if I'm using autotune on that track. And then that'll go into my chain. And then I usually start with a compressor first. I like just getting a clean compression sound, just kind of bringing it up a little bit, just so I can hear what I'm doing a little bit better, and just locking it in. I use either the R compressor from Waves, or I use the CLA 76, which is also from Waves.
That's a great compressor.
One other thing on plugins, do not sleep on presets, because it saves you so much time. There's amazing presets already there for you. Just go through them and use those as starting points. And that's going to save you tons of time. And it's also going to make you a much better mixer, because these are pros who are giving you their templates. So definitely use those. So, okay. So I go from that compressor, and then from there, this is my sauce. I use the SSL channel strip EQ. And that is just incredible. I use that for totally shaping the tone and feel of my vocal. And if you took that plugin off, like that plugin is doing 90% of the work on my vocal every time. If you took it off, like it sounds like crap. You put it back on, sounds amazing. And like what I never cut, I never high pass past 100 hertz, but I always do that pretty much. An extra thing, if you have the SSL, I like to turn the release all the way down, and then, or no, attack all the way down, release all the way up, and then just play with the ratio a bit. And then I just like to get a little bit of compression on the channel strip, and that just kind of rounds out all the EQ moves that you're doing. But I like to cut out the lows pretty drastically. I usually find anywhere between like 50 and 250 is a problem area, and I cut those out a decent amount. And then so I think of like EQs as more like the ranges, like low mids, high mids, etc, instead of like the exact level. So there's like 4 different areas that you can change on the SSL, and I love it. And I also started using shelves a lot more, and shelves are just fucking amazing. Like, simple as that. Like, I love them, dude. Sometimes I'll throw a 6 dB boost on a shelf at 5K or 8K.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and like I go like it makes a big difference, because you got to think of it like it's moving all that whole range after that. So like it's not, it doesn't sound just like bad because you're moving everything up. And you can get a lot of brightness by doing that, and a lot of like crispiness. So I use that, shape the tone. I spend a lot of time on that one, make sure I get that one dialed in. And then I usually round that out with, I need to pull my chain up right now. All right. Digging
probably
it
do that
a little bit. Let me pull it up.
Yes, let's see. Oh, I don't actually have as many stuff in mind that I thought I did. I've gotten my my chain down pretty streamlined, honestly. I lied.
Yeah,
But
mine's
yes.
like the exact same, but blanking on it.
Yeah. So while he's doing that, what I run through on mine is I run what's called a chill. That was not great. I run what's called a BX console. It's a emulation of I think a Logic State 9000. I think that's what it is. Yeah, SSL 9000J, and I run that as kind of a de facto preamp. What I have tracking in, I usually print with an LA2A off of the Apollo and a Neve preamp coming in, and so it's usually pretty damn clean when it comes in. Then I'll use the SSL to kind of give it a little bit more texture on the input. Then I'll throw my auto tune in after that. And then what I found is, depending on the people I'm recording, if I'm mixing with studio people, I turn this off. But if I'm not mixing with studio people, I'll have a filter EQ up. Filter is probably the wrong word, but what I do with that first EQ is I take out bad frequencies and bad harmonics and stuff that's like room noise, and just really kind of fine tune it. And so I'll go through and make a little band and kind of sweep it through, and then take out all of the problematic frequencies to kind of make it sound a little bit crispier. Then I have 2 compressors. I have one for peak and one for flattening. I usually only run with one just because, again, it's damn clear if it's coming in, but I have the 2 set up just in case. I have one that's called BX Opto. I use that for my maximum one. It's just really simple, very clean. And then the second one I have is Vertico V23, I think it's called. Yeah, Vertical VS, sorry. Vertical VS that I have in there. And that's also just a really, really clean thing. Because again, like I said, my goal with the initial recording is just to get as clean a sound as humanly possible. After that, I'll throw in a mag EQ to give a little bit of that high crispiness that you get from your shelving. So I just throw an extra EQ off of that, and then I'll have another EQ at the end of that just to kind of make any sort of adjustments. I usually use that for like automation. If I want to do like a filter sweep in some capacity, I'll use that EQ. I use Q3 for everything, Fab Filter Q3 for everything. I do not touch another EQ.
Must have EQ.
I honestly, that's really the only EQ for me. I'll use some if I want like an analog sound. Like I said, like I used a mag EQ for get a little bit more analog crispiness. But any EQ adjustments that I'm making, Fab Filter Q3. So if you do want to buy a plugin and you don't know what to buy, if you just really want to say, you know what, I can't really hear the difference in anything and I just want to buy a plugin, Fab Filter Q3, you will not go wrong, I promise you, because you will use that all the time. You have unlimited bands, you have dynamic control, you have just everything in that one thing. I don't sidechain because I use Q3. That's how powerful that plugin is.
Q3 is incredible. I would say that's a must-have EQ. I use one other one, and that's the SSL channel strip, which is also a compressor. So I use the SSL for tonal stuff. And then any moves after that, get like frequency sweep in, any of that stuff, all Q3 always. If you don't want to buy the Fab filter, and you do get that slate bundle, they have this one called the Infinity EQ. It's very similar to the Q3, not as good, and it doesn't have the dynamics. You can't multiband certain frequencies, but it comes with the $9.99, so you can always try that out. But you can always get I think they have a month test on the Q3, and you should try it out, because as soon as you use it, you're gonna be like, holy shit, like I was definitely missing out by not using this. One thing I started doing with that a buddy just gave me, I started changing the band. You know how it's set to 12 dB?
Mhm.
Like how I started using 24 on some more low end stuff, and also high end stuff, and that you should try that out. I can't really explain how it sounds, but I don't know, it smoothens stuff out. It makes it more like you're moving like a whole group instead of just one frequency. Because honestly, I do frequency sweep for sure, but I also know for the most part my problematic areas now. So I always take like a couple out, but I really try not to frequency sweep too much, because when you go up so high, everything's going to sound bad at times. And you can just start taking out so much, and that's just going to compromise that raw signal. And that goes back to knowing your music. My music's kind of raw, so like if I took out all the raw signal, it's just going to sound terrible. It's going to sound
Yes.
over processed. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I do agree with that. So a thing with filter sweeping, and what I'll see people do, which I do not encourage, is you go through and you pick your spot and you'll raise that point on the band and go all the way up to like 30 dBs, and then like really fine tune the Q rate and then sweep it over. And so if you're doing it that way, that's not the move, because as Ellie said, everything's going to sound bad if you boost one frequency up to 30 dBs. Everything's going to sound like a tuner, everything.
Yep.
And so I'll boost it up to about 3 dBs and just sweep it over there, and then try and figure out if there's anything that's problematic off of there. And then I'll take it down probably about 4 dBs in that one spot, and then kind of expand it, try and get a little bit naturalness. My buses, I usually run with 3 buses consistently. It's reverb, delay, and parallel compression PC. Reverb, I swear by ROM. I haven't heard anything. I've tried a lot of reverbs in my life, and I swear by ROM. It's RAUM. I think it's actually made by Native Instruments.
Okay.
But it's just so airy. It's so light. It just sounds so damn good on everything. So I use that as my reverb. And then delay, I have plugin alliances, BX delay, that I just dial in for any sort of effects. Just a lot of customization options in it, honestly. And then my parallel compression, I use what's called a purple audio compressor. And effectively what that is it has 0 color. It has no effects. It's just pure clean compression.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I want off my parallel compression. Just a nice clean high end off of that. And then I'll boost that over.
You can always tonally shape that, like what you said, with boosting the high end, cutting out the low end on that. Yeah, definitely. That's a killer chain. So I finally remember mine. The plugin I was forgetting was actually the Fab filter next. So okay, so vocal bus. Here we go. So I'll give this out to you guys too. So RX8, that's getting rid of noise. Then Vocal Rider to get the levels pretty consistent. And then that all goes to my main vocal mix on the bus. And I usually I've been playing with the CLA 76 now, and that's mostly what I'm using. Then the SLS EQ to set the tone. And then I'll go through and do a few frequency sweeps, play with the low end more, with the Fab filter next. And one thing I started doing now is I'm actually taking out a good bit of like 6, 7, 8, like 9K range, like that high end range. I take a good bit amount of that out now, because I'm going to be adding it back in later on some effects. And that can really give you a lot of color. And then from there, I run that into an RVox depending on the track. I don't know if you've ever used RVox, but that plugin, it's a compressor, no attack or release. It's already dialed in. All you do is just change the gain and the threshold, and all it does, pretty much, all you need to think about is how up on the beat do you want it to be, and that's how much you should press it. So I just use a little bit just to give it a little bit extra juice. Engineers either love that plugin, like absolutely love it, or they absolutely hate it. I would give that one a try because it's super easy to use, and that's how I get stuff up front. every time.
Mhm.
And then from there, I run that into an SSL compressor. And I do just a very small amount. I just want the texture and the smoothness that gives me. So and then from there, I'm using the virtual mix rack from Slate. And this is actually, I stopped using a parallel compression send, and I started using the VMR because of the mix knob. So I'll start with harmonic distortion, just because I think it sounds cool. And then I run that into a distressor, and a distressor is pretty much it's kind of like it's kind of a compressor with a little bit of distortion built into it. So I use Slate's distressor. I crunch that hard. Uh, Long release, so it's getting smashed, and then I turn the mix knob down to 0, and then I just turn it back up, and then that's how I get the thickness of the parallel compression without using parallel compression chain. I actually like it a lot more. I used to, on my parallel compression, I used to use the CLA 76 on Bluey mode and just smash the shit out of it, and that worked great. But I really like the distressor and the mix knob on there. And then from there, I have this there's this coloring plugin on there that what's it called? FG Bomber. And
Oh
they have
yeah.
3 vocal presets, and I just use that. I use it very minimally, but that's where I get a lot of extra crispiness just to round everything out. So by the time I'm done with my raw vocal with no effects on it, it is just very crisp and clean. So after that distressor and the coloring, then I just do one more EQ, and this one I go drastic on it. I'll make all the moves I need to, because now I know I have a very clean sound. So if I want more high end, I might add another shelf and like 4 dB, you know, or I might cut out a whole bunch of extra low end just because I don't think it needs it in this record. And then lastly, I'll throw a de-esser on it. And I don't like to use heavy de-essing at all, ruin stuff. So stay away from that. Maybe 6 dB max on a de-esser. And if you're finding that it's not taking away the S's, instead of just smashing that de-esser, go back in your mix and go in your EQs and start doing some more EQ adjustments to take out some of those S's. Usually they're lying in that like 6 to like 8K or 9K range, sometimes down to 5. Sometimes even 3. It just depends on your voice. But yeah, de-essing is big. A lot of people ruin their mixes by de-essing that too hard.
That's why I stay away from de-essing almost entirely, just because
Okay.
I've had so many. I'm just like, you're cutting out all of this stuff, all of it. But that's also why, like, I use the purple audio compressor for my PC, because it's just so clean. Like, it boosts all of that high end without touching any of the S sounds onto it. And so I'm like, oh yes, that's. So once I found that, I was just like, yes, all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll also like take I'm not scared to smash de-essers on like I go heavy de-esser on like background vocals and ad libs and stuff, because I don't want any extra S's at all. So okay, yeah, so from there, that's when I start getting into my sends. So I would use a parallel compressor if I wasn't using the VMR, but I use the VMR. But then it's just I use a doubler, Waves doubler. That's just gonna add a little bit of stereo field, and it's very minimal. You just want to feel it, not hear it. And that's gonna give you a better spacing on your vocal. So I definitely recommend Waves doubler. That's on every single one of my mixes. And then I have a FX bus with mostly I'm just playing with the wet signal a little bit, either like a flanger or a chorus or something like that, and then just kind of adjust the taste there. And then I have a coloring plugin, and this is, I said I take out like a good amount of high end in the raw. This is where I add it back in. So I just use this exciter from Waves. You can also use the free one from Slate. They have a free exciter that's pretty good. And that's where I'm adding a lot of my high end back in. And I'll actually sometimes use a de-esser on that too, because I find that it can add some S's back in. So I de-ess it a little bit, but that gets you the value of doing all this stuff on your sends instead of right on is what Roane was talking about, or Roane was talking about earlier with just so much control. You can dial in exactly how much you want. So I just dial these up just a little bit. How much color do I want? That's how much color I want, and set it, and then I'm gold. And then from there, I do my reverb. I might touch delays. And then, I might touch like a CLA vocals. Have you ever played around with that?
I have. I don't touch them anymore, but I dabbled in the CLAs a little bit,
They're
and then I
fun, dude.
just
Yeah, I throw that on a send, and that way, like, I don't have to commit to using it.
yeah.
I can just dial in like a little bit, like I'll add like a little bit of extra bite or something like that on the low end, just to kind of give it more body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so something like that. Yeah. So that's pretty much my chain, and then from there, like the mix is almost done. It's really just going through it and re-leveling stuff, and then moving on to the mix bus and stuff.
All right. So what is your your go-to I guess mix effect thing? So like for me, what I usually do, because I don't keep it in my chain normally, but whenever I want something interesting, I use Little Altar Boy, and
Yeah,
I stand Little Altar Boy
me too.
to almost a fault, as it's so damn good.
Yeah,
um,
it's
um,
damn good. Yeah.
so
Uh,
just
a little alter
the
boy.
switch.
Um, Pro Tools has this built-in lo-fi plugin, and this thing, I swear to God, you put it on anything, you turn the distortion knob 0.2, and it sounds better. It just sounds better. Like, and pretty much it's just like adding like gritty distortion, but like in a clean way too. So if you have an 808, you have Pro Tools, you have an 808, throw a lo-fi on it, turn it up a little bit, your 808 is gonna sound 10 times better, I promise. Every time. Every time. So that plugin is a secret sauce one. I throw that on a ton of stuff whenever it just needs a little extra sauce. I like to use I use Ozone plugins a good amount for special things. I really like their stereo imager. Gives you a ton of control.
Yes.
Um, I use harmonic distortion quite a bit now. I'm still learning the best ways to use it, but harmonic distortion is great for getting loudness without adding volume. Um, and then definitely tons of Little Altar Boy. H delay, I like printing my delays. I don't really automate them. I like printing them instead.
You
Um,
print them from tracking?
yep. I just I just highlight the place in the track and then just copy it down to another one, and then just have that just straight on H delay, 100% wet, and that's how I do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
That's
okay.
it.
I thought you meant you were tracking it from or printing it from the Apollo.
Oh no, no.
Like on the end, I was like, "You're a madman."
That'd be crazy. I have to time that up perfectly.
Yes, I was like, "You're insane."
Yeah. Uh, there delays I found. Honestly, and like the style of music where we're kind of at right now, delays are very selective in a lot of mixes. And if you're just throwing delay on your whole chain and you have delay going 24/7, like I almost guarantee you it's gonna mess with your mix. And so with delays, I'm very selective about where I have delays. Like I have delays when you want to hear it, and the way I get around that too, and like having a little bit of delay, like like an eighth note or something, just kind of there, is through that CLA vocals. You can just get a little bit, and it's like made for that. So
Yeah.
it's really easy to do, and that can get me some of the ambience. So yeah, those are kind of like the fun plugins that I mess around with. Pro Tools also has this Verify plugin, which is great. The best part about Pro Tools is their audio suite. I don't know if you know what that is.
Mm-mm.
You can print vocals straight to audio file, or print plugins straight to audio files.
Oh.
So I can just pull up Little Altar Boy and render it right on that, and it's gonna give me the audio file with Little Altar Boy. And with that, you know how how those like pitch modulation ones typically have some latency.
Yeah.
Latency by doing that.
Yeah, because automating Little Ultra Boy, he does not like
Yeah.
he does not like automation at all. And
Yeah.
so that's what I usually have to do. I'll go through and I have my work where I put it on 100% mix and then I'll render out that bounce and then kind of create the new track after that.
Yeah.
Which is effectively the same thing I was doing, but it just does it automatically for
Yep.
you.
Yep. Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
And then
Pretty
yeah,
cool.
that's the best part about using Pro Tools is that audio suite saves you processing power, and also just it makes a lot of latency issues non-existent, which is fantastic. And then I also use oh crap, what was it? It'll come back to me. Yeah, those are most of the fun plugins I use. There's a million and one fun plugins that you can play with. You can do a million and one things with plugins in general, though. I just recommend you really learn the fundamentals of the plugins and like why doing this is going to do this and etc. Like why when your attack is lower, you're going to get more upfront vocals in most cases, but why when you turn release all the way up does it sound does it not be in your face? Or something like, or all the way down, why is it not in your face? You know, it's just really getting your ear to where it needs to be for the most part, because you can do a lot of stuff with stock plugins, honestly. But little Alter Boy is one that I would recommend buying. That's
It's
on
just
most
there's just nothing that comes close to it. That's the thing about that plugin. There's just because I've looked
I
for
found one.
everything.
Waves
Did you?
just released a new pitch shifting one that's pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like $30. I forget what it's called. Vocal
Oh,
bending.
vocal bender.
Yeah,
Yeah,
vocal bender. Yeah,
I saw the ad for it on my Instagram.
it's really easy to use, super easy to use. But you know, I would still go grab Little Alter Boy just because I'm more familiar with it.
It's just so, and it's four knobs.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
doesn't get any easier than that.
Yep. Exactly. And I love like just testing different stuff too. So like I'll print a whole bunch of them and like I'll put those, I'll completely have the mix done, the master done, and I'll export it and like go listen to it in different environments with these different sounding ones. And that's kind of how I work through stuff. Cause I find like a lot of times if I'm just sitting at my computer, like I can't really tell the difference between tiny changes and stuff. But like when you give it a day or you give it a different listening environment, you can really start to figure those things out too.
Yeah. And I think that's a really critical part. The most frustrating thing about engineering, for me at least, is that the harder you work on the mix, the worse it's going to sound. So what I mean by that is if you sit at your computer and spend 10 hours straight mixing one track, it's going to sound like shit 100% of the time, simply because your ears are going to start messing with you. And so 2-3 hour increments, make sure you take breaks with it. You have to rest your ears. That way you don't get there, because what I've realized is if you mix something, you're like, oh, that's not enough low end. That's not enough low end. And I'll go through and I was like, you know what? I think this sounds great. After about 6 hours of work, I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up and everything just sounds super, super muddy. Nothing is clear. Everything just sounds horrible. And so it's hard training yourself to be an engineer, because like you want to have a lot of work ethic, but a great work ethic will hinder your progress as an engineer.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, ear fatigue is very real. You got to give yourself some time. And I love sitting on mixes for a day too, and just coming back the next day with a fresh set of ears. Like you could finish the night and be like, this is it. This is awesome. And you test it in all these different listening environments and it sounds great. But then the next day you're like, what the hell was I on last night? Like honestly, like this sounds like garbage.
Exactly.
So usually like those first 3 plugins in my chain are so critical on vocals, and I don't touch those ever after I set them in. And that always sets the tone for me. And that keeps me from tinkering around with all that stuff. And honestly, like most of the time after I get like that core mix done, it's just automation. And that's like where you take stuff next level. So like you could sit down and spend hours doing automation, and I think you'd probably be fine there. But in terms of like actually affecting the core tone of stuff, definitely give yourself some breaks.
See, I'm not as disciplined as Mr. Ellie over here.
I'm not disciplined at all, man.
I've been going through my stuff. I'll be 3 hours in a week. I'll be 3 hours a day after a week, and I'll be like, you know what? I think I can fix this compression. Let me go back up to this top. I think I can do this. Like, no, don't do that. Don't do it.
Yeah.
So I mess around with stuff
tweaking,
like that.
it's a never-ending rabbit hole of tweaking.
It really honestly is. And you're like, you think you're sounding it better. And also save consistently and save previous iterations. When you think it sounds good, save it as a different iteration, because what will happen is you'll tweak it so much and you'll forget what it was initially. And that was the best version of it.
Yep.
And so you go through and I'm like, oh, what did I do here? And I'm like, no, what settings was it on? How do I get it back to sounding like it did before? And you'll forget. So save all your past iterations. That way you can go back and reference exactly what you did at that time. It's very, very, very critical for it, honestly.
Random thought. One thing that I started doing recently, I don't know if you ever experimented. So I take like a multiband, just something that allows me to listen to solo different frequency ranges, in like a broad sense too. So like all of the low end or something like that. I started using, I kind of use that a lot when I'm going through it and making giving everything space in the mix. So like I'll just go on the low end and I'll hear like why the hell is my hi-hat in my low end?
Yeah.
And then I'll go in and I'll change the hi-hat, and just being able to only listen to the low end or only the mid range or only the high end can give you different perspectives on how you're actually hearing things. And once you really start getting into referencing other people's mixes and like professional stuff, you can just go in and do that, and you're going to hear exactly that frequency range on that mix, and it kind of gives you like a fresh ear. So like for example, like I just did a Jack Harlow one as a reference, and like there was no vocal in the low end at all, and like then I went to my mix, which I was trying to master kind of similar to the Jack Harlow one, and I could hear a ton of low end, and as soon as I took that out, mix came together a lot better. So like little hacks like that, just to give you different ways to listen to stuff, and solo different frequencies and stuff, is really good, but never go too overboard with that. Always think of the bigger picture of everything. Like always listen to everything as a whole, because that's what matters end of the day. Not if your low end sounds fantastic, because it doesn't matter if your mid range sounds like shit.
Exactly. I'll have to try out that trick though. I stay away from multi-band compressors just because
They're scary.
It's compression in its own right is like, it took me so long to just figure out what on earth it does.
Yeah.
Like I understand the concept of it. It just took me forever to realize, okay, these are what these knobs are actually doing.
Yeah.
And then the multi-band compression messes with my EQ as well. And I was just like, yeah, I don't want to deal with any other stuff. But that is the use of multi-band.
Yep.
That is the use of multi-band I will use. I will use that because that's
do you have a Waves Vitamin?
I think so, yeah. I've not opened it ever.
I use that one for the solos. You should try that one. It's really good. Okay. And then also like that's pretty much just a exciter too. Mm-hmm. So you can like add a little bit of extra sauce in with that. I'm mostly using harmonic distortion instead of that now, but yeah. And then I guess we can dig into mastering, and then we can answer some of the questions we got asked.
Sure.
All right, cool. So mastering wise, really, like Roane said, it's all about the levels, and it's all about the mix. If you're giving the engineer a crappy mix, I know Aj, you asked like how, if your vocals are sitting too far back in the beat, like how do you get that out as an engineer, as a mastering engineer? And like the truth is, like go to the mixing engineer and tell him to turn the levels up, because like that's what's gonna matter most. You can kind of fake stuff, but like it's not gonna sound good. So go back in the mix, make sure the mix is right, because that's what's going to make the master right. In terms of mastering, I'm still learning, but I'm very happy with my progress there. And what I do is I use a Q8 always, or any EQ is going to work. And I just cut out the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows, typically around like 18 and like 21,000. Just because you don't need that. Most human ear can't even hear those frequencies. It's just going to muddy up speakers and give you some bad sound. So I take those out always. I always try to keep the volume around like -6 going in, and make sure that your like mix bus is not clipping at all too. You don't want any clipping signals going into anything. And then from there I throw on ozone. I have a preset for ozone that I use every time, and I adjust it a little bit. Not going to give out the preset, but ozone is great, and there's a ton of presets in ozone that you can use, and just start there and start coming up with your own thing. I'll tell you what it is though, and it's an EQ, multi-band compression, harmonic distortion, and then the stereo imager, and that's what it is. And then from there I go to I usually go to a do I give out the sauce? You know what I'm talking about.
I do. Not too much. People sleeping on it.
All right, I'll throw it out. Chef's particle accelerator. I throw that shit right on, and then just dial in. There's 4 knobs. I dial those in. I'm not really gonna say much on that. It's sauce. That's all you gotta know.
It's a damn good plugin.
It's one of those plugins that just freaking works. Like you just throw it on and it just works. And then from there I do some light limiting, not too much. But that's just bringing up the noise floor just a little bit. I try not to have too much gain reduction on that. I really don't like. I won't go more than like 2 on like the reduction on the limiter. Because then you're gonna lose the power of your kick in your bass and stuff, and that's just no bueno. You need that shit to hit these days. And then I'll use a just any gain plugin and push that shit up. I use Slate's mastering plugin a lot to do that, and because it also has this pretty neat dynamics range, so you can kind of change. you can change the perception of the dynamics while still being loud, which is critical. And then I'll usually just use another limiter. And then also like streaming platforms, they have different guidelines, and a lot of people don't follow the guidelines. Like Spotify asks you to send them stuff at -1 dB. Did you know that?
I
Yeah.
did. I learned it. I was talking with my manager, and he told me about this. I was like, "What? That's a thing?" He was like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, a different thing." I was like, "Oh,
And
interesting."
what you're gonna notice too. So most people go to like .1, right, or
Hmm.
something like that, or .2.
Yeah.
Like I'll take mine to -1, and then but when I look at it, it's peaking at .8. So if it was at .1, it'd be clipping.
Yeah.
So that's that's no bueno. So that's why you do that. Just make sure on the limiting, you can get carried away. It sounds really good when you're doing it. But what you don't want to lose is the low end. And that should always be your goal. You want your low end to be still be there and how you want it to be, while still bringing everything else up to create the loudness. And mastering is really all about mastering, balance, and then loudness or dynamics. Okay, yeah, whatever. You got me.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think a critical thing, just for if there's any beginners out there, what Ellie's talking about is the mastering process. Do not get that confused with what is on your master bus in your DAW. So just because you have stuff getting sent out to the master bus does not mean that you are actually mastering your track. What the master bus is just a culmination of all of the tracks that you have that are in there. And so you'll have, let's say, 7, 8 different vocal chains. That's just the combination of all the stems that you're working with and what the final sound is. But in order to master, you have to take the stuff onto that bus and kind of affect the tracks as a whole. So what a lot of mastering engineers want is you want to render out the actual beat or the actual track as a whole at a certain dB level and then send it to them. So they're only mixing one stem and so, or mastering one stem. And so that's what that is. Me personally, I do not do my own full masters anymore, simply because I've gotten a lot of value off of getting a fresh pair of ears on mixes that I've spent on. And so a lot of times when I'm going through the mixing process, I'll have everything sounding pretty close to what I want, and then I'll take the volume down, and then I won't be able to hear the nuances that someone with fresh ears on the track would be, because I already have like a preconceived notion of how it's supposed to sound. And so I'll throw in a demo master. I usually just throw Ozone 9, run that mastering assistant, and then make tweaks off of that, and usually call it a day off of that most of the times. So when Ellie was talking about the stereo imagery, I mix in mono, and then in my subgroups that I have, that's usually when I boost it out into the stereo imaging in the actual mixing process. And so I'll have everything mixed. That way I can have it, if I want it panned 40% to the left, 40% to the right, I can control that very well. If I want to control the movement of it, I can automate the location of it a lot easier in mono than I would be able to do in stereo. And then I usually leave my leads on, I'll usually leave my leads on mono. Oh no, I'll put them into stereo, but I won't use like an effects imager. So what that means is there won't be any extra color added to the actual imaging. It'll just push it out wider. And so I'll just have like a stereo compressor that'll compress everything out. If I'm singing, I have a plugin called the BX stereo image or stereo imager, and that adds, I don't know how else to describe it other than the stereo sound to the vocals, and it just gives a little bit more color, a little bit more depth to the actual sound off of it. But I handle all that stuff in mixing. Mastering, I don't do too much. Ellie's probably not even probably I've heard his masters. He's definitely a better mastering engineer than I am. And so I'll just throw it in there, boost up all the run the Ozone 9 chain, and then I'll touch up the EQ, because it usually likes to take off a little bit more low end than I like it to take off. And so I'll boost that up a little bit. The maximizer in Ozone is very, very powerful. And when you go through off your loudness, you want it to sound as loud as you can without clipping. And so the second you hear distortion, that's when you start bringing it down. There's not a set tone off of it. There's not a set number you hit it. It just very much varies from track to track. And a very, very fun thing that I found with mastering is once you take stuff to that level and it's mastered and everything's good, you can go through and try and bring up like the volume of some stuff, and it won't sound any different. So you can take go down to your 808, you're like, oh, I want more 808, and you'll throw like 20 dBs of gain onto it, and it does not sound any different than it did but 20 dBs ago. And I'm like, oh, that's so crazy. And so that's what he was talking about, like the difference between volume and loudness is a big difference, because just adding volume is not going to fix your problems.
Huge difference. And like, and by like giving stuff certain like different loudness and stuff, you can like, I'm finding I'm turning my vocals down in volume a lot more than I used to, and they're still sitting better in the mix. And that's just improving processes. And that gives me so much more control of the loudness. Like for the longest time, I could not get my loudness over 10 without having an extremely smashed sounding dynamic mix, which just sounded like crap. But like now I'm getting like I think that one I did for you was like -7 loudness, which is like extremely competitive. Like Justin Bieber's is in like -6 to like -9 range.
Yeah.
And like it's funny because Spotify recommends you go -14, yet everyone's pushing it that hard.
Yeah.
And that's how you get stuff to pop these days, because they're making sure the volume is consistent, but the loudness is different. So loudness is extremely important. I can't stress that enough. And that's really where it gets next level. I would recommend on the limiting. I'm a huge fan of doing small moves and doing multiple of those moves instead of doing just one drastic one. So like on limiting, instead of going like, I'm going to bring this down -4 or -5, I'd rather split that up into 2 and go down 2.5 and 2.5 or something like that. And I find that allows me to keep more, it doesn't squash stuff as much. But don't go crazy with it and throw 6 limiters on a track. You don't need that.
Does that sound goodizer in that felt?
Yeah. I mean, dude, sometimes though, like those plugins, man, like Sound Goodizer is one of the ones that just kind of works sometimes. You can definitely like sauce it way too hard, but like if you just the right amount, you know, it can add a lot. Kind of similar to the Sheps in a way. But yeah, definitely like don't go crazy with the limiting. You're gonna want to go crazy with the limiting, especially like with that maximizer in ozone, because it sounds really good. But trust me, you're gonna be crushing the dynamics and the kick, and that is just exactly what you don't want to do.
Exactly. And if you can get it, I don't know if there's probably more iterations of it, but the one I use, I think it's called ADPTF Stringliner. It's from a Plugin Alliance, and effectively what it is it adjusts the master to how it would sound on the streaming platforms. So you can collect like Spotify Premium and hear how it'll sound on Spotify Premium. Because what you might not notice if your ear's not trained is that every single distributing platform changes the sound of it a little bit. So the big reason why I don't use SoundCloud anymore is because my stuff needs to be loud and it needs to be clean. And what SoundCloud doesn't do, it smashes the master that it has off of it. And so my mixes don't shine on that SoundCloud platform because A, that's not where my audience is. And B, it takes away the quality of what I was trying to achieve off of it. The stuff like you'll see a bunch of lo-fi stuff on SoundCloud because it adds to the aesthetic of like lo-fi stuff. And so like lo-fi people have to be on SoundCloud because like that final adjustment sounds great on SoundCloud. YouTube free will destroy a lot of stuff. So going back to what we talked about earlier and considering your ideal audience, get up some sort of plugin like that that'll help it sound the way it does on those actual plugins, and say if your ideal customer is listing on Spotify Premium, tailor that mix to Spotify Premium because that's where most people are going to hear everything that you have. But Spotify sounds different than Tidal, it sounds different than Deezer, it sounds different than Apple Music. All of those things, they add and sound completely different. So it's not going to sound the same on every single platform.
Yeah. So what most of them are doing actually is dragging down the volume, and then they kind of normalize that across all the songs. So you want your stuff to be like louder than they recommend, because if it's not loud enough, they'll add to it instead of take away. And you don't want them to add crap to it. You want them to tone yours back. So that's why I always exceed. There's this website called Loudness Meter, I believe. You ever seen that website? You can put in your audio file, and then it'll show you what changes each platform would make to it.
Okay.
So there's like certain ranges you can be in there. I use the Waves WLM meter, and that's like my main meter. I use that in a VU meter. VU meter more on like specific sounds, and then the WM on the whole master. And that'll tell you your exact LUFS That's what it is, right? Yeah, LUFS, which is your actual loudness.
Yeah.
So Spotify recommends 14, but I'm telling you, you can look at, if you go to musicstacks.com, you can see the loudness of every track on Spotify, and every pro sound is going like -7, sometimes even -5, which is just absurd. Like that is so freaking loud, but it stands out, and that's
Yeah.
why. Yeah, so I would the WL meter, fantastic, highly recommend that one. Metering is one thing I do recommend that you get some very good metering plugin because it's extremely important.
100%. Absolutely.
Sweet, you want to dig into some of these questions?
Let's get the questions.
Sweet, I'll pull it up.
Oh.
Okay, so first one, how to clear up resonance.
Are you talking EQ? Is that
Yeah, that's
what we're talking about?
I think he probably means like boominess and just crap, just bad resonant frequencies.
Oh yeah, usually just EQ. I found a lot of resonance is like higher in spectrum, and so a lot of it comes from either a bad recording space,
Yep,
or just cheap reverb is usually what I found. Like most of those things coming out, a lot of that can be fixed off the EQ. A bad recording space though, it's really hard to fix in a mix. And so if your raws are sounding really resonant-y, just get some sort of, what I found, a cheap home solution out. If you can't afford acoustic foam, something like that, throw a mattress in your room and just stand it up in the corner. It'll help just absorb some of it. Just remember, when you're treating your room, anything is better than nothing at all. And so what I'll have some people do is like they record in their closet and they'll pull everything out, because that's what some people like. You see on YouTube, some people record in the closet. Do not record in your closet, because the amount of treatment you need in your closet to stop the sound frequencies from bouncing off the walls and back into the mic is a lot. And you probably don't have enough clothes in your closet to like make that work properly. So don't record in the closet.
Yeah.
So get in a big open space as that you can, and then try and get some sort of mattress in there.
Yeah.
And that'll help fix a lot of your problems, because you can EQ some stuff, but if you get a clean vocal recording, you'll notice a lot of that'll disappear. And that's not even mic quality. It's just room space.
Yeah, and also be careful of your headphone volume, and get headphones that aren't leaking into the mic. I hear that all the time, and that's just like, you can try to gate it out, but you can't gate it out when you're rapping over it too. So like, just be careful with that. Definitely EQs, and it's mostly the room. So if I had just a terrible room, I would do what Roane said, and like just do everything I can to dead the sound up a little bit. Because I mean, you can use a dead sound because you can add everything back in with plugins. It's not ideal. Like, you do want some raw, good sounding stuff coming in, but if you dead the sound, you can use ozone plugins. Like, they have some like declicking, dehumming, the denoise. You can use all those, and that's going to give you, it's going to take away from your sound. So it's a give and a take. It's how much of the crap do you want to take out, but it's going to get more frail with every one of these ozone plugins that you use to clean it up. So it really just comes down to getting a good clean audio recording coming in, which just cannot be overlooked, and it oftentimes is.
It really is. It makes a world of difference. Like, I can make a really clean Blue Yeti vocal shine like crazy.
Yeah.
But if you, like I said, if you record a Neumann in your kitchen, it's not going to sound as good as the Blue Yeti in the clean room.
Are you using Neumanns?
We have the entire Abbey Roads collection at the studio, all of it. So I don't record. I recorded on the Neumann just to like say I can record on the Neumann, but it actually doesn't suit my voice that much. So I'm like pretty upset.
Super bright.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's super bright. I'm like, I don't like. So I use I record on the KSM 44.
Yeah.
That's usually the one I roll with now. And I'll use a AKG. I don't remember what model it is, but I'll use that on occasion too. But I really use the KSM 44 most of the time, just because it works best with my voice. But yeah, I was upset when the Neumann didn't work. I was very upset.
Yeah, the Guitar Center thing that you mentioned, guys, take advantage of that, because that's huge. Getting to hear stuff before. All right. Well, hope that answered your question on resonance. That's kind of a weird one. should I be side chaining my reverb and delay, or should those be in the main chains?
I think you're talking about the buses, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if you really meant side. Oz asked it though, so I know he knows what side chaining is. So I mean, so yeah, I would use them on sends definitely. Unless I'm doing like what I was saying with how I print my delays. I don't. You can automate delays. I just like printing them because I can choose exactly like which phrases I want to have the delay on. Exactly. But other than I actually have been playing around with side chaining delays and reverbs with like kicks and my vocals and all this other stuff. One thing I started doing recently was like side chaining my vocals with the kick. So when the kick hits, the vocal doesn't duck. So there's a lot you can do with that. But yeah, I recommend having them on your sends for sure.
Get Q3. That's my solution to side chaining.
Back.
Yeah, always on sends, all effects always on sends. I would never put effects on the main just because you lose so much control.
Yeah.
And also you have to learn a lot about the plugin if you're going to put it on the main chain. So like reverbs usually come with an EQ in there, but it's usually clunky. It has a different tone than other EQs and it just adds more complications. And so with the other stuff, I can literally just put the reverb on in at a send, put a preset on, tinker with it, put the mix up to 100 and then EQ out whatever I don't want with the actual EQ that I have. And I don't have to learn how to create my own reverb just to use reverb. That sounds good.
Oh crap. What was I about to ask? Man, my brain is just not on today, man. I need more sleep. I've been going off like 4 hours of sleep like past like 5 nights.
Dude, I'm saying.
Dude. Not enough damn hours in the day.
Dude, that's what I'm saying.
All right, next question would be, should I send all my instruments into one send channel before the master channel? So yeah, that's a good question. So I've been doing less of it. Generally, I would say yeah, there's like no downside to it, but I actually found a downside, and sometimes I think it kind of squashes the signal a little bit much. And the more things that you can not bus and just have be its own file, I would say do. But obviously busing helps a lot with your processing power, and it depends on what computer you're with. So if your computer can't handle having the same vocal chain on 10 different vocal files, yeah, then bus that for sure. And same thing with the beat bus. Like if you can manage to throw all your beat stems into your master bus instead of using a mix bus then your master bus, I would recommend doing that.
What I separate my stems into subgroups, and so like all the stems won't be all together. So like I'll have my drum subgroup, and then I'll have like a guitar subgroup, the bass subgroup, keys, and like an SFX subgroup for all those. And then I'll send those to the same place I send my lead vocals and my background vocals.
Okay.
And so I have all of these subgroups that are linked together, but the entirety of the track still goes to one master at the very end. And so that's the workaround I've done with it, just because it gives me a little bit more control, but also saves on my processing power. Because when I'm done with the drums, I can freeze the processing power off of that and say, okay, all of these plugins are good. These drums are good. I don't need to adjust these anymore. Just save this channel and get rid of the processing power that I'm using to dedicate off of that.
Yeah, you can definitely segment stuff up like that. I've done a little bit of both. I'm kind of finding though that I like just throwing everything into a beat bus and having that go to my straight to my master, and my vocals also just going straight to my master and exporting from there. But it's definitely up to you. I would, if you are doing like what Roan's doing and you haven't tried just sending it all to the master, give that a shot and see if you like it. Because it sometimes it kind of shocks me when I put something into like a bus with no plugins on it or anything, and it just instantly sounds different, or like off time or something, like just something weird, and I'm like, nah, it's just not quite right. And it makes sense because I mean, the more processing you do, the more your PC has to work, and the slower things are gonna get. So yeah, it's kind of what your machine can handle, and also like what you're comfortable with. So give them a shot.
For sure.
Condenser dynamics, we kind of covered that already. Pablo asked, what are your steps to get a clean master? Also, how to master to draw out the vocals if the vocals don't sit properly in the mix. Also, how to thicken the sound and make it cut through without sounding too distorted or boomy. So on the distorted and boomy, that's why I use that EQ as the first thing my mastering chain and take out those like that 18 hertz and like 21K. That takes out some of those, so it'll tame it a little bit. In terms of thickening the sound, that's a great question. You can always, there's a ton of stuff you can do. You get extremely creative. You could duplicate your whole entire mix, grab like solo a frequency range that you want to boost up, and just add some loudness back in, add some volume back in there. And like, so like sometimes like if I have like just a beat, just a wave file beat, I'll go and I'll just identify the low end range, and then I'll duplicate the track down and then just add a little bit of low end back into it. And that's kind of how I split up a stem, something that's already all together in one file, and split it up. So you can do stuff like that. The Sheps literally has a thick option on it. So that's where most of it comes from, to be honest, for me, but yeah. And then in terms of vocals sitting properly in the mix, you got to go back in the mix, man, for real. Yeah.
Exactly that. Just don't try fixing stuff in the master that can be fixed in the mix. What I've been doing off of, I think you covered everything I would do as far as on the mastering side, but for thickness, what I've found is get 2 recordings on your lead vocals, and that usually helps. So 2 separate recordings, not just the one duplicated down, because of the way that the physics and the wave files and wavelengths work is like, if they're the exact same, they'll clash with each other. But if they're like slightly different, then it'll help to enhance. So I'll have one lead vocal that's at the main, and then I'll throw the second take, just sit right underneath it a little bit. And that'll add a little bit of thickness to it. I usually don't do it too much for like fast rapping, because you usually want that just to be high and crispy and just off of that. But especially on singing vocals, if you don't have harmonies, or if you just have the one take, having just a little thing underneath it to add a little bit of substance to it, a little bit of depth, usually helps a lot.
Definitely.
And then Sheps also.
Yeah.
Sheps is,
yeah, no, on that too, the waves doubler that I use, that'll add that, parallel compression. That's like the name of the game there, is thickness. And that distressor that I use, that is where most of my thickness comes from by far in my vocals. Distressor, that mix knob, man, like you can just crank that and dial it in exactly where you want it. Sounds fantastic. It also gives you some super clean distortion too, which is fantastic. I love me some good gritty distortions, but clean.
yes.
Yeah. All right. Saturation, good or bad? Depends on the song, right?
100%.
I mean, like, so Drake, for example, on So Far Gone, he wanted to stand the hell out. So what do? They put a ridiculous amount of saturation on everything. And I heard 40 talk about this before, and he was just like, you listen to it today and you're like, holy shit, like this is so saturated. But nobody was doing it at the time, and it stood out like crazy. And So Far Gone took Drake off like insane amounts. So, sometimes breaking the rules is the good thing to do. And 40 is a great example of that, because he does that constantly. And look at where Drake is, and he's the master behind Drake's sound.
100%. What I usually do for saturation is, I mean, like you said, it's very much depending on the track. What I've found is a really fun way. I actually found this on accident, but a really fun way to get a lot of saturation on your vocals is I'll send my parallel compression to what's called pre-fader. And so normally what is set to is post-fader, meaning on the logic of the DAW, it's going to go through all the main effects chains, and then it's going to add in everything. When it goes to pre-fader, it means that before it even touches this regular chain, it's going to throw my parallel compression on there. And so everything, the parallel compression is getting condensed. It's getting EQ'd. All that stuff is thrown on there. And for whatever reason, it just has everything. There's just a lot of color, a lot of wetness, a lot of saturation that gets thrown into it just off of that motion alone, just dictating. So like location of plugins really does matter, especially in that main bus. And the sequence in which the plugins are activated definitely makes a difference in the sound for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more there. Yeah, there's a ton you can do with that stuff. And so I feel like in that case, like the reason why it's sounding so good is because you get in the straight raw signal on the parallel compression, and then you throw the saturation on, and then it just has more to color up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can just add that in to your liking, and that's why you use it on a send. So if you're not finding that you're getting like enough saturation and you want more, but you throw it on and it sounds like crap, go ahead and try throwing it on a send. Or also, I urge you to try some harmonic distortion. It's very, very similar. And it's hard to notice unless you have a good ear. But once you start using it, you'll notice that you're missing it. So I recommend looking into that for sure. EQ first or compression first? So this is a good one because you said you did EQ first.
I always EQ everything, and this we go back and forth on this, but I think so. To me, I'm a logical dude. That's why I use Logic, but so logistically, to me, it's about getting the cleanest vocal. Well, actually, no, I can't even say I use the EQ first because I print with the LA2A, and that's a compressor. So I guess I do compress before.
Okay, yeah, he's compressed. But you can do either or. I've watched a ton of videos of really, really professional engineers, and they do both. Some people like to just like, this is what I like to thicken it up and like get a nicer sound first before I start taking stuff out really with an EQ and like tonally shaping stuff. So that's why I compress first. But I know a ton of people like to take out like the really bad sounding frequencies and stuff like that before they run it into their compressor. And I think it just depends on you. And whichever one you do, just learn to stick with it. Because I think it's just a little different. And the longer you stick with something, the better you're going to get at doing that exact process.
Yeah. I will say if you have a bad environment, I would definitely recommend EQing first, just because compressing a lot of that resonance is not going to give you a good sound.
Yeah, very true.
But if you have a good environment, I think you can make it work either way.
Yeah. Good point. De-essing or EQ ducking?
EQ ducking all the way. I do not touch de-essers. I am very anti-de-esser.
That's very
But
fair.
I also use Q3 though. So my final mixes, there'll be like 17, 18 different Q3s, like just in the project file. It's just doing separate things.
Yeah. How do you find what like frequent? How are you ducking those?
The dynamic bands.
Okay.
I'll take them around to the 6 and 9 can and kind of dial it down and just very, very slightly. Mm-hmm. I also, again, being the tracking engineer, I'm a pretty ruthless tracking engineer, honestly. Like if the take is too bad, I'm like, no, you need to do this better. Same thing like singing. I can fix stuff in Logic with like flex pitch and pitch correction, but like you gonna get damn close before I end up doing that. So having control over that as an engineer makes my situation a little bit different. So I say that to say I don't have a lot of sharp S's because I'm killing those before they even touch the track. If I hear it in the tracking, I'm like, no, you record it again. Like stay a little bit closer, get a good pop filter that helps eons. You can use I usually don't have to touch a whole lot.
Really well. The pencil,
yes,
that honestly does. It works fantastic. So a few other things you can do too. If you have Melodyne, they have this little S tool, and you can literally see every single S like perfectly, exactly where it is. And you can just turn it down a little bit. And that'll take out a tiny bit. You can also like turn the volume down on the S's a little bit. You can EQ duck it for sure. So I like I said, I use a de-esser last on my vocal chain, and I don't use it much. And if I still have too many S's, then I'm going back and I'm EQ ducking every time. So I would say it is mostly EQ ducking, but I do use a de-esser just to round it out and make sure that I get it out. And then when I have like, if I have the time, or if like I really want to nail, like get my S's sounding right, then I'll go through with Melodyne and individually do every single S. And like that's individually doing stuff is always going to get you the best results, probably, if you're good at what you're doing, but it's also time. So it's how much time you can spend on something. And also like, just don't get carried away, because it's so easy to get carried away.
It really is. And that's why I don't touch Melodyne ever.
Dude,
I refused.
Get Melodyne, try Melodyne. You have it, right?
I do. I don't touch it because I know how long it takes.
Bro, I gotta like send you a video of me using Melodyne sometime though, because I figured out like how to use it quickly. And like, woo.
If you have a quick way to use Melodyne, I'll be for it, because I know it gets better results than anything else. I'm 100% sure of that.
I'll tell you right now how. Okay, so transfer it in, right? And then get your key right, snap to chord scale, turn pitch all the way to 100, modulate pitch modulation to like 50, or pitch drift like 50, and then highlight it all, take the modulation tool, turn that down to the auto-tune sound that you want, how auto-tune you want it to sound, and then just go through and then clean up any pitches that like need to be adjusted, you know, just normal pitch correction. And then when you just click the tool that has the modulation one at the top, you can change how like the bend in and out of pitches.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so you get the auto-tune sound you want, and then you smooth it up. And that's really all it is just smoothing it after you get all the pitches set. And like it probably, like the first Melodyne thing I did probably took me like 4 hours to go through a whole track and do the Melodyne, because it's freaking tedious when you like really dig into it. But now it probably takes me like 30 minutes to go through a whole track of Melodyne, and it is damn worth it.
I'll have to
Give it a
see.
try.
I use flex pitch though, because flex pitch is still like damn good, and it's far quicker.
I'm gonna send you a video where this guy is saying, "Don't use flex pitch, use Melodyne." he's like, this one sounds okay, but he's like, listen to the Melodyne one. It's just like, yeah, okay.
It just takes so much. Like it's 30 times as long.
Yeah. And there's on like your records though, like your personal stuff, use it.
My personal stuff, I might touch it. I might move to Melodyne for my personal stuff.
Like that one singing one you sent me, like Melodyne, that bro, that would be prime.
I probably will. I'll probably do it.
Do it. I can like send you over a quick video too, Sue.
Yes, please.
Yeah. No problem. And then, okay, so automated risers or sound files. It depends for me. Delays, like I said, sound files. Automation. Honestly, like they're exactly the same. Honestly, like for the most part, it's whatever you're more comfortable with. I use both.
I use sound files because I have Splice, and making my own sound design is not something I'm interested in doing. So I'd much rather just say, oh, this person's already done the work for me, boom, plug it in. I also have an unholy amount of sound samples because I thought I was a producer at some point in time. So I have legit 400 gigabytes of sound samples just on my hard drive, and I just reach for those.
I went on like earlier this year, I never produced in my life. Like I tried, but like just didn't want to put the time into learning it. And I like 3 of my favorite producers all dropped like sample packs, and I spent like $250 on all of them, and like I don't even fucking produce. Like,
that's what it got me, bro. It was like, oh man, I love this dude's
so
production.
good.
It sounds so good, and then I go through and I do it. I'm like, nah, I have the same sounds, but I can't make them sound like you do. It's like, you're just arranging. It's like, no, I can't do it.
Yeah, it's hard, dude. It's freaking hard. But it is nice too, having really nice sound sometimes, because like sometimes I'll go in and I'll layer an extra kick. But to be honest, I'm usually working with big YouTube producers, because there's a reason why they're big, and it's because their sound is really good.
That's the same way with me. I'm like, y'all know what y'all doing. Y'all have everything in there. Everything's aligned and tempo shift. Every time I get dudes, well, like a key of a great producer, if you're going to send an engineer a track, pan your hi-hats and adjust the velocity. If I listen to your hi-hats and I hear pan stuff and I hear velocity fluctuation, I'm like, I don't need to touch anything in here because I already know this dude knows what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, I this one producer sent me beats one time. I was like, the first one I heard, I was like, this is dope. And then I just realized he was literally, there were like 10 beats. His hi-hats were quarter note hi-hats, like no rolls, nothing. The whole track, 10 beats straight. I was like, bro, like it sounds so bad. Like, what are you doing? You said drum loops and drum machine advantage and disadvantage, but strike that one. That would be producing. I don't know if you have anything on that. I don't.
There's no advantage to using drum loops, because in a mixing process, mixing a drum loop is heinous.
Oh yeah, true that.
It's absolutely heinous. You have no control.
Already. Yeah.
You have no control over anything. So you can make it work. It's just awful.
Yeah,
awful.
It kind of goes to the same thing with like, if it's a really good producer who made that loop, then it'll probably sound fire already. But if it's not, then you probably shit out of luck, and you probably shouldn't use it.
Exactly.
Loops are interesting to me. If I were to start producing, I would probably take a loop approach, definitely to start, to just like get a feel for it, because you can just throw loops together and actually get some really dope sounding shit, and you can make beats so fast if you do that. Like honestly, I feel like I would just like if I was to be a producer, I would just try to create a sound library of a whole bunch of different like loops that I personally made, and then just be able to like just go through all of them and just throw them together
Mm-hmm.
and like create my beats that way. That's how I feel like I would do it. But
100%.
yeah. What situations would you decide to utilize parallel compression from Kaz? We touched a good amount on parallel compression. But I would say like in any situation where you want some thickness, that's when I would use parallel compression.
For sure. And I also don't put them on background vocals. Because if you put them on background vocals, it's just going to pop out with the leads, and then your leads aren't going to stand out as much. And so if you want the crispness and the thickness, you want the extra texture for it, only put it on that stuff. But I always leave them away from my backgrounds because I want those to sit behind everything else.
Yeah, definitely. I take off. That's a great point on ad libs and dubs. Like if I have like a delay going on all of it, like I'll take off the delay. A lot of times I'll take off the reverb and add a new reverb in.
Yes.
Because that it just adds extra stuff. Like honestly, a lot of dubs these days are just reverb splashes, and it sounds really good. So yeah. So I would use parallel compression when you want thickness, but be careful too, because parallel compression, when you go too hard with it, it can cover up a lot of real issues with the actual raw signal going in. Instead of dealing with that, you're just covering it up, and that's not good.
Exactly that. And also, if you want to do ear training, great way to find out what is a good compressor and what's a bad compressor is with using it for parallel compression, because you'll notice very quickly how that stock compressor sounds when you start dialing it in. When it's smashed to hell, you're like, oh, that sounds like shit. That's horrible.
Seriously.
You'll notice very quickly.
CLA Bluey, I'm telling you, CLA 76 Bluey mode, smash that shit, input, drag it up, rip it. The one plugin I'm missing right now that like I really freaking want, I had the trial, was the what is it? The blue plugin, blue compressor. I'm blanking on it. TubeTech MK.
Oh yeah, I love TubeTech.
It's so
I love
good.
TubeTech.
So good. I use the SSL and slot of the TubeTech right now, but I would probably be using the TubeTech if I had it. But that's like a $250 compressor.
Yeah, see that's why that's label perks. They have I think 75 UAD plugins.
Are you using any hardware? Like analog gear?
Just Unison from the Apollo. That's it.
Okay.
So you use nothing analog.
I want to get like a real compressor, like a $1,000 like preamp compressor one day, and just try that out. Honestly, like it sounds so fun.
So I've tried. I compared because they actually have a TubeTech there. And I tried the analog one versus the Unison one, and I actually like the Unison one better.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's kind of
so I was like, huh. But I also like stuff cleaner than everything else, and it did a better job of making it clean.
Gotcha.
So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I just use Unison for everything in the Apollo.
Yeah, Apollo.
So
it's a move. But I will say
it's definitely a move.
If you don't have a Mac, don't buy the Apollo because it will not work. I have this big ass screen right here. I can't even use it. I'm using this laptop over there. Like,
dude, that's what I did. I just got a new Mac Mini with the M1 chip, and I was like, okay, great. Let me plug it in. I was like, nope.
Yeah, it's so annoying, dude. It was like the most aggravating thing ever. So apparently, like, it's just not compatible with AMD.
No, it's not.
I'm just like, fuck. And I also bought the Thunderbolt and not the USB. So like, I had to buy a Thunderbolt adapter for like $90. Like I just got a bone on it, but I made it work, and it sounds so damn good that I'm okay with using my laptop to do it. And it somehow has enough processing power. I'll probably get like an iMac someday or something to use the Apollo. But there's a lot of good other preamps out there too. But honestly, like if I was like in the market, let's say I had like $1,000 for like a preamp and a mic or something, at this point, I think I would prioritize the preamp.
Really?
Yeah. Cause there's so many mics that like are really good that you can just like think about it. Okay. Would you rather have a guitar with a really nice guitar with a tiny amp, or would you rather have a gigantic amp with a decent guitar?
I'd rather have the guitar because I can put the amp in the DAW.
You're cheating right now. This is cheating. So, all right. most people would say the big thing, so they could just blast that shit like crazy.
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of the idea behind it. But like the Apollo, the latency stuff, it makes a big difference. And honestly, like hearing a dope sound in your ears and giving a dope sound to artists you're working with too in their ears makes a massive difference in their performance. Like a lot more than you really think it would be. And that's the real benefit of the Apollo is the zero latency recording.
Yeah, and that's 100% true. Like even when you're tracking people, like tracking yourself, if you think about it, you can go for stuff a lot more confidently if you sound good in your monitoring while you're recording. And so that's why if you go to a studio and we have like a good engineer will be like, hey, they'll like encourage you because their job is to get the best take out of you. It's like, hey, try things this way. You know, you're doing great. Try and project a bit more with your diaphragm, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And like encourage you, build you up, because when you're confident, you sound infinitely better on recording. And a great way to do that is if you have clean sounding stuff in here. Just the LA2A from the Apollo makes a world of difference when people recording. They just go, oh, I sound really good. This is unmixed. I was like, yup. It's unmixed vocals right there. Welcome to Neumann and LA2A.
Exactly.
Run it through a neat
and a studio setting.
It's like, yes, you sound this good unmixed. Congratulations. This is what it is.
That's how you do. All right, so that's it that we got for questions. It looks like. Oh wait, no. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's it. I guess I one last question. If you were to recommend plugins that you would say definitely, like, if you're gonna spend money, like buy these plugins, what would they be?
ROM is definitely there. There's getting a good reverb makes a world of difference, and there's so many bad reverbs out there. So ROM is definitely my go-to number one. Number two is Little Ultra Boy, just because the stock vocal effects that you get, the Vox or the stock pitch modulation, is just so difficult to hear off of that.
Yeah.
So those two I would get more so than anything else. EQ and compression, you really have to train your ear to hear the difference out of it. And you can have a great $300 compressor and not know what the threshold means and not know what attack and release means, and it's going to be worthless to you.
Yep.
So those two, you really can hear off the rip what they do and how much better they sound than all the other stuff. And so I definitely revise those two more so than anything else, because everything else requires a little bit of skill to hear the difference between.
Definitely. Yeah, those are really good ones. And it's so you took a kind of a different approach from me on that too, because I do agree. Like Little Altar Boy, to me, when I decided to buy that one, it was like, this is a must-have plugin. Like I need this. Everyone uses this. It's great. It kills it. And it's like the only one that sounds this good. So like that, and that's for like effect stuff. But I was like, when I was building my library up, I was focused on like getting like the really like the right compressors and the right EQs and stuff. So I definitely agree. If you have no idea what the hell you're doing and you're just starting, just learn how to get stuff working first, because you're probably not gonna be happy with your mixes in 3 months anyways, what you're doing now. But I would, in terms of like just plugins that I think are essential to have eventually, and these, like this list alone is almost $1,000 and it's 4 plugins. So like shit's expensive, but Melodyne, Ozone, the SSL channel strip, and then Fab Filter. I would recommend all those, and I would say that you can buy all those very confidently that you'll use them on almost every mix.
Q3 is, if you still don't know what you're doing, you'll still find use out of Q3. Like it's that much better than every other EQ out there. It's that much better.
It really is. And every engineer who I've talked to all says the same thing too. They're like Q3. Like there's
no substitute.
No better. Yeah, there's just no better EQ out there, except in my opinion the channel strip. But you know, you haven't even tried it yet. I've been telling you about it for like a couple months. You got to give it a try for me if you have it.
It would take so much for me just to like consider putting something other than Q3 in my chain.
And I love it too, because it's there's no there's no visual audio spectrum, so it's just all based on your ears.
I need my graphs, bro.
Yeah, but the graphs are where they get you, bro. That's how they get you.
I need my graphs. I need my visual confirmation that what I'm doing is good.
on the verbs, I never you remember when we talked like months ago, and we were talking about reverbs, and you're like, yeah, I think your reverb's off. Like if you got I think you should invest in a better reverb. I didn't notice that really until I did invest in a better reverb. And I have a bunch now. I really like the Manny Marconin delay and reverb.
I haven't seen them.
You never use those? Those are like the quickest way to get it. It's pretty much like okay, here's a ton of different reverb sounds, and here's a ton of different knobs to change every aspect of the sound. So it's like an all-in-one reverb, really quick. I've heard from Neek. Neek says if you ever just want to like a Travis Scott delay, the quickest way to do it, Manny-verb every time. I can hear Manny-verb all the time, or Manny-verb and delay all the time in his mixes. Those are really good delays and reverbs that are really cheap from Waves. And they're going to get you a really quality sound, and it gives you a very wide range of stuff. But like I said, if I was on a budget, like $120 a year, go buy the Slate bundle. You're going to get a ton out of it. You're going to get a ton of value out of that. Long term, it's probably not a good plan to just like keep paying a yearly subscription. Slate's coming out like bandits on that, no doubt, but they have good plugins, and they have a lot of them, and they're awesome. So I would definitely recommend just giving that a shot if you just need to expand your suite as a whole for not much money.
Sure, yeah, definitely and also like utilize your presets. Or if, like you said before, like just rehashing, if you're starting out, get to a preset so that you can hear what it's supposed to sound like, and then study why it sounds the way that it does. Like take your stuff off, mute stuff, solo stuff, really get into, okay, what is this plugin specifically doing for this track? How does it making this raw vocal sound this way? And that'll help you increase your learning curve infinitely. Like don't get too worried. Once you get comfortable, that's when you start throwing in all your automation, all your weird risers, your effects, your filter sweeps, all that fun stuff. And just focus in on EQ and compression, because that's going to be 90% of your mix for every single time. Just mastering exactly what the hell those two things do, and you'll be fine.
And that's foundational stuff. Like the automation and stuff, you can get as creative as you want with it. And like you can for the most part with like your processing and like the raw signal stuff, but like at the same time, like everyone kind of has the same goal: get a clean and good sounding vocal. Whereas like automation, you can do a million and one things. So when you're first starting, I wouldn't focus on automation. Like I wouldn't spend all your time on automation. I would spend all your time on getting that clean mix, because that's always the baseline to everything. And without that, you got nothing. You can do all the automation in the world, but if your clean mix doesn't sound good, then it's going to be like, what is this? What is going on?
This is interesting, but it sounds trash.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's, oh, okay. I have like one little side note of like, actually, so I just want to talk a little bit about energy buildup and things that you can do in mixes to kind of hit energy buildup. So one thing that I've been playing around with doing is using EQ, just high end or high pass and low pass filters to filter out different sections of a song. So like choruses, I'll have them be the full spectrum, but a verse I might shave off a little bit of high and a little bit of low, so it's in a different spot. So when the chorus comes in and hits full, it hits full. And that's, you can do a lot of energy buildup that way. And you can also like layer plugins. So like another thing I like doing sometimes, like let's say I'm going for the killer outro, that's going to be that's the climax of the song. Like I'll slowly add an extra layer of plugin, to each different section, approaching that outro where it just goes full out, as an example. And I think that's like just some interesting stuff. And I hope that like kind of opens some of your guys' mind up to like what the next level kind of stuff that you can do once you can start getting really creative with it.
Yeah, for sure. I haven't tried to do it through the effects, because I started doing music as a producer, and so my initial thing is to start tinkering with the beat for like my energy build. And so it's fascinating to see, as like an engineer, like starting off as an engineer, to see how you kind of get that same thing off of a different approach. Is very fascinating, because I'll usually go through and I'll do like tape stops through the actual beat. Filter sweeps through like the drums and the keys, and might cut out some places and place it in different things. It's just really about the arrangement of the production. And that usually gets me the energy build that one. But I haven't tried it with the plugins though. You've perked my curiosity. I might have to try
it with a vocal one time. You hear it all the time, like you know, like an intro, and like right before it drops into the verse, like they'll do the band pass and give it like a tighter range, and then so when it comes in, it just hits so much harder, and it really is kind of insane. And you can do like very small amounts, very subtle amounts that can make a world of difference when your chorus hits. And like 99% of the time, you're gonna want your chorus to hit the hardest and have the most going on, most excitement. Energy buildup is something that in music, like once I've really started understanding energy buildup, like that's when shit started getting real.
100%. It's definitely And it goes all the way back to the very beginning, like considering your audience. Like if you sit back, and it's a big reason why I like to send my stuff to a different mastering engineer than me, is because they get to listen to the track as a listener. A lot of times when you're creating everything, you have this preconceived notion of what it's supposed to sound like. And so you're not going to notice, and the producer might not notice, and even the mixing engineer might not notice what it's like to hear something the first time through. I had a track I mixed with the dude the other day. And I was saying, you know what? I think this track is too long. Like, it's just, I think you need to cut off this last section because I found myself skipping it.
Yeah.
But I engineered that track. We worked on it for a week and a half. I'd heard the track probably about 100, 150 times. And so I sent it around to 20 people, and they're like, no, this is great as is. Like, it's usually there. And so that different, unique perspective really, really helps kind of fill things. And so if you think it's interesting enough, get some other people just to listen to it. It's like, hey, I feel like it's dull here. I dull here, because you know what's coming. And same thing with like, the volumes on everything and the levels of your vocals. You might think it sounds good because you understand everything you're saying, but to someone else that's new, first time listener, that doesn't know your lyrics and hasn't mastered, memorized your lyrics or anything like that, they might want the vocals a little louder so that they can hear you a little better. And so get yourself a small, very small, I repeat, a small circle to get feedback from people you trust.
Yep.
And
And people whose ears you understand too.
Yes.
Like I have a friend who I know, like, he's not my target audience. But when I send him a song, like I know, I understand how, like, his music tastes really well. So like I understand, I have a good idea of what he's going to like and what he's not going to like. And it gives me a totally different perspective on things. And like another thing too, is like, so my song, like, I Wish I Could Feel Nothing, didn't think it would do what it did. And then songs that I think are going to do really good, like, don't do good. So like you can get 1,000,001 opinions, but they're all that, opinions, and nobody knows until you put it out and you test it in the market and see what it does. And that's just the truth. So don't be afraid to get creative, because I could spend 5 hours getting one damn delay to sound a certain way. And then I'd play that and no one even freaking hears it, except for all the engineers who are giddy about it, but no one's going to hear it. Just the people who are that into the engineering side of things are going to notice. So like there, yeah. So like, at the end of the day, it's all about the vibe. And if you give someone a song and it's a vibe all the way through, it's going to be a good song.
Honestly, that's what it is. Although, if you do want someone to geek about the engineering, send it to me, because I do be like, I see what you do with that automated panning right there. I see what you went for there.
Dude, I like, I sent you something one time. It was like a nasty guitar reverse reverb, and like no one was picking up on it. I'm pretty sure you picked up on it. I was like, yes, let's go. I was like, it sounds so sick.
It does.
Yeah. Dude, reverse reverbs are my shit. I love them.
It's the wave.
Yeah, for real. All right, well, that's pretty much all I got today. I think we're running almost 2.5 hours, so
I'm all for it. Lots of content, super fun.
Yeah, tons of fun. I could go all day, honestly.
Dude, that's what I'm saying.
Awesome. It's cool. I will hope you guys found some value in this, and if you guys like it, we're happy to answer any more questions and maybe do this again.
For sure.
Definitely.
I'm Roane. We're signing off. Thank y'all for having us. Thank you, Mr. Ellie, for setting it up. It's very fun.
All right, see you guys around.